like to invite you to join me in the opening prayer. Let me, here. I will chant it in Sanskrit and I will describe its meaning as well as we go along. Uh, Before we go in, let me actually describe the prayer itself. This is an opening prayer, and this is how it sounds in Sanskrit. I'm going to sing it, so don't worry about having to repeat along. Just listen. Now, this is a really old prayer. It's many thousands of years old. It's appeared in multiple Upanishads and often serves as the opening uh, prayer in many of these conversations between the preceptor and the students. And in that sense, it's very familiar to people in the yoga circles as well, because that's the purpose it serves. It is in a very interesting way a very American type prayer, in the sense that it's almost a legal document, because what it's saying is, may we both, you and I, be protected, may we both be nourished, may we work together with great energy, may our knowledge be radiant, may there be no differences or disputes between us. Om, peace, peace, peace. So that's the opening prayer. I'm going to invite you to join me in silence, and then I will chant Om 3 times. If you are familiar with how Om is chanted, you can chant along, and just listen to everything, and then we'll sit in silence for about a few moments, and then we'll begin. So, with that said, please sit comfortably in whatever posture you're sitting in. Please sit with your back straight. If you're sitting on a chair, please sit with your full hips on the chair and your back straight. The back does not need to be stiff, just straight, upright. Back, neck, and head in a straight line. Close your eyes and relax the expression on the face. Relax the expression on the face. Relax your shoulders. Relax your belly. Bring your attention into the belly. And as you breathe in, let the belly expand. As you exhale, let the belly return back. Stay in the belly, expanding as you inhale, returning as you exhale. As you exhale, let everything go. Let go of all your thoughts. As you exhale, let go of all your preoccupations. As you exhale, let go of all unfinished business outside this conversation. Breathing into the body, feel the body energized. As you exhale, feel a sense of lightness now, all the load lifting, all the thoughts evaporating. Bring your palms together in Namaskar Mudra at the heart center by pressing the palms together at the heart. Pressing the palms together, touching the fingers together, gently touching the back of the thumbs into the chest. Now hold it right here and bring your attention to the hollow space between the palms. Pay attention to any vibration, any sensation, anything that's going on here in the palms at the heart center. Stay here through the prayer. We're going to chant Om 3 times. It's a low and long Om sound. Exhale completely. Take a deep breath. Inhale. Inhale. Om. Inhale. Inhale, and I'll chant. Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Bend forward in a deep sense of surrender. Come back up, breathing in. Bring your palms down into your lap and sit in silence, observing your breath and enjoying this silence. Now, rub your palms together to generate some heat, and then gently shield your eyeballs to transfer that heat, and then blinking, open your eyes and pull your palms back. Good morning and welcome. My name is Gaurav Rastogi. My spiritual name is Gaurav, and I'll be talking to you today about Hinduism or Sanatan Dharma. We have about 3 hours together, and I'd like to make this interactive and enjoyable for all of us. We will have a couple of breaks, allowing you to of course, take breaks and also ask questions and also engage in conversation with each other as well. Now, I believe this is the uh, back end of a very busy week, I'd imagine. So I hope all these classes have been fun. I've been teaching this class at the Chaplaincy Institute now for, I'd say, 3, maybe 4 years. So I've met some of your predecessors, and some have retained contact and have become good friends over time. My And I'm looking forward to building a relationship with you as well. Feel free to ask me questions. If you would like to interrupt, that's all right. Or you can type your questions into the chat window, and I'll be sure to address that and try to um, uh, see if I can answer it as truthfully as I can. Today, I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself, my tradition, who the Hindus are, what Hinduism is, and what are the broad spectrum of practices and traditions and stories that form Hinduism. And being that you're going to work as as chaplains or spiritual directors, I'd like to also tell you about how we're looking at spiritual direction in the Hindu tradition. It is rather new to us. So we're having to do a lot more thinking, a lot more asking, and a lot more learning. And in that sense, we have a clean slate to work with. And I'd be happy to share that with you as well. I live in the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area, and I've been here for 20 years. I was born in India into a Hindu family. And I have a regular Silicon Valley life, which is I have a startup. I've been an executive in the past. I've founded and sold an artificial intelligence startup, and now I work with many startups here. So that's my everyday life. And along with that, I also run 2 educational nonprofits. One is Living Deeply Foundation, and I'll show you the link and you can look it up yourself. Which my project there is to take the learnings and teachings of yoga and the Hindu tradition and make them easier to consume and practice in everyday life. And so the idea is to make them more contemporary, but still truthful, and not in a way that's appropriative or in a way that's making a mockery of the original intention. So I want to live those truths and then transfer those truths. That's one nonprofit. The other is the Hindu Community Institute, which is closer to your project, which is we're teaching people how to learn to serve. And we teach people to learn to serve as counselors of Hindu tradition, which is our name for the program, which is similar to chaplaincy, but for volunteers. So essentially, think of it as a pre-chaplaincy type thing, but built on Hindu foundations. As I'm sure you'll appreciate from all your other classes this week, the Abrahamic faiths have a certain philosophical foundation that works for that system. We live in a society that's founded on those philosophical. I'm not saying religious at all. I'm saying philosophical foundations, and the dharmic traditions, which is the Buddhism, Hinduism, Sikhism, Jainism. All these traditions come from from a different philosophical framework, and often it's hard to see the difference, but I'd like to point a few of those sort of similarities and differences to you. And uh, so as you appreciate, so Hinduism is a very complex tradition, and I'm going to try to explain it to you in a somewhat rapid manner. So there'll be a bit of a whiplash going here and there and so on and so forth. I'd like to keep it to a minimum so that we keep on a steady direction. Now, with that said, are there maybe a show of hands would be useful? How many of you are somewhat familiar with Hinduism? Maybe just raise your hand. Okay, a few. How many of you are not at all familiar with Hinduism? A couple of people. Great. Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. Um, all right. So there is broad familiarity. What will surprise you is possibly that even if you're not familiar with Hinduism is a faith or tradition practiced by about 1.2 billion people, primarily coming out of India, but obviously present everywhere. But the ideas of Hinduism are actually more familiar to you than you might think, and increasingly so now than ever before. So they have seeped back in, that fragrance has seeped into popular culture, and arguably American philosophy, American culture is deeply, deeply informed by ideas emanating directly from Hinduism. If you look at popular culture, a subject that I am very interested in often, you look at Hollywood movies, and if you look at The Matrix, you look at Inception, you look at Cloud Atlas, the idea itself of reincarnation is very familiar to you now. The idea of living in a virtual reality or a simulation is somewhat familiar to you. It's not alien or it's strange. But not just weirdo Hollywood ideas. Vegetarianism is familiar to you. If When I came to this country 20 years ago, I found it very hard to eat outside because explaining vegetarianism involved a lot of kabuki, a lot of hand movement, and a lot of inspired pity from the other side, saying, "What are you going to eat?" There's sides, and there's the sides of sides, a bunch of peas maybe that you can eat. But now, if you see, vegetarianism is very popular. The interest in ecology and is very popular, of course. You look at yoga itself. I'm a trained yogi. I'm a trained yoga teacher. I run a community of 50 yoga teachers that has delivered about 1,800 classes since the beginning of the pandemic. And as a yoga teacher, I'm happy to tell you that those ideas and practices come directly from Hinduism. If I say namaste, you know what it means, even if you've never met a Hindu. That's familiar to you. Of course, you've met the Hare Krishnas, I'm sure, sometime in your life. And you know of Ganesha, the elephant headed god. All of these ideas are familiar to you. You look at even the end of life, all the way to something so deeply ingrained in in tradition and religion. More than half the people in this country now cremate their dead. Their their dead. And that cremation, that process of cremation, is very deeply wired into Hinduism. And that you would agree with me, if matters of life and death are are very often at the center of many religions, and to treat and how you treat the physical remains of your departed is a religious subject, and yet more than half the people practice a process which is core to Hinduism. And so, yeah, Hinduism will appear strange. Millions of gods, millions of ideas, very complex, very colorful, very bizarre, even. But at its core, you're familiar with Hinduism because all those ideas have seeped into popular culture. The idea of a multiverse seems strange, but not to Hindus. The idea that all of this is illusion it seems strange, but not to Hinduism. All of these ideas you can trace back somehow or the other to Hinduism. But I don't say this in a jingoistic way, not in a way that says I'm better than you or this tradition is better than the other. It's simply that this is a tradition that remembers the longest. Every other the accumulation of wisdom in any region, any tradition, any philosophy takes multiple generations. Newton did not just sit and wait for the apple to fall on his head to figure out the idea of gravity. Many generations before him had worked on the underlying ideas that led to the questioning of how do things fall, what's parabolic motion, and therefore what is gravity. For Newton to come up, as he said himself, if only I'm able to see far, it is because, as you know, the quote goes, I stood on the shoulders of giants. And those shoulders of giants means that a civilization that's been around for longer has had more standing on the shoulders of more giants, upon whose shoulders more giants may stand, and so on. Every civilization accumulates wisdom. But can you speak with people that built the Stonehenge? Can you speak with not their descendants in physical sort of genealogy, but the culture that built the Stonehenge and worshipped the turning around of the northward ascent of the sun at the end of December? Who are those people? The people and the culture that built the pyramids. Are they here to explain what the pyramids are for? Older traditions, the Greeks even, 99% of their books and philosophies were burnt by raging mobs. Cultures acquire wisdom painstakingly over long periods of time, and then suddenly a raging mob from somewhere comes in and burns down your temples, burns down your libraries and universities, and next thing you know, you're back to square one. But the Hindu tradition happens to have been in an area of abundance. The Indian and Chinese regions were together more than 50% of the global economy for thousands of years of peace and stability. Imagine if in 200 years you can go from no electricity to all this internet and all this excitement in 200 years, not more than 10 generations. What would happen if thousands of generations were allowed to accumulate wisdom? So even when other regions were eventually made to lose their history, this tradition happens to remember. And not just remember for itself, but on behalf of everybody else. It turns out if you go to pagan tradition and you ask a Hindu scholar, they would explain those pagan traditions seamlessly. Goddess Sibyl, Cybele, Goddess Sibyl. If you look up the cult of Goddess Sibyl, all over Anatolia, going all the way to England, temples all around, temples all the way around, a goddess that rides on a chariot driven by lion. If you go to any Indian, any Hindu in India, they will recognize that goddess with the same reverence and respect. So we don't, the memories this tradition contains aren't just the memories of the people from India. They're oftentimes memories from thousands of years back of people and traditions that no longer have a voice today. But we still remember. It's a tradition that is intimately connected with ecology, intimately connected with our place in the universe. So it isn't something which is about a set of rules. Here's a tablet with 10 rules. Go and go forth and do your thing. No, it's a tradition that learns, listens, and is very aware of its connection with everything, and that makes it very interesting, but also complex. And in transmission, what happens is, one second, something is buzzing, and I'm wondering which part of me is buzzing. Oh, there. That's what's buzzing. I apologize. So it's a tradition that when it's transmitted, it loses its vitality. So think of it as an autopsy. When my body is autopsied, what can you deduce about my living self? How tall I was, how heavy I was, what color of skin I had before it turns dark blue, how I looked, maybe what my face mask will look like. You will find out things about me that have nothing to do with the reality of me. That's just the outer container. And so when this tradition is communicated by people that don't practice it, oftentimes you're reading an autopsy report. And the problem with that is you can come away thinking Gaurav was, this tall, this heavy, and lived for this long. The mere facts, none of which tells you about my vitality, about my own living nature. And as a lived tradition, as a tradition that still lives, still vibrant, very thriving, it's very important to understand it and learn it from the perspective of someone who's living it. But being that it is so vast, it's even for people that practice this religion or this tradition, it's very hard to articulate what the tradition actually is. Practically impossible. Even for me, the space given to me by separation over time from the land of my birth allowed me to look back and reflect and say, okay, this is what the tradition actually is. Oh, this is what it meant. A few years ago, I went back to the temple I used to go to when I was a kid. And on these walls, there are inscriptions, things that are written, old verses. And now they had new meaning to me that I had no idea that's what it meant. It turned out there was a complete inversion of reality. What I thought to be my tradition turned out to be the exact opposite of it. The popular version, even for many, possibly most practicing Hindus, is that we go to a temple and bow before a statue. And you would think that this is exactly the sort of tradition that the old, founding fathers of Abrahamic religion were railing against. Idolatrous, idol worshipping, nonsensical people and practices, worshipping a stone. How ridiculous. You would think that. But the truth is, interestingly, as I discovered, the exact opposite. The exact opposite of that. So, and that's what makes Hinduism quite confounding and interesting and very compelling to understand. I'm going to pause here because I've covered a lot of sort of distance, but I haven't given you space to ask questions or express your areas of interest. So I'm going to pause for a couple of minutes, take a breather, and see if you have specific questions or comments for me to work on. And then I'll come back to my original trajectory. Yes, Joe.
When you said it was actually the exact opposite, can you just unpack that a little more? What you discovered?
Sure, yes, yes. So I promise to do that. So, okay. Any other questions? Is there any other question? Sorry. Well, yes, sir, please.
My question is to kind of differentiate for us the difference between Hinduism and Buddhism, because Buddhism shares a lot of the traditions that Hinduism does.
Good, good. Yeah, that's a great question. Any other questions?
This might be a little too
Hey, Caitlin.
complex. Hi, this might be a little too complex to answer, but so just trying to piece together for myself the difference between like really ancient indigenous traditions and more modern traditions, which seem to have, I mean, comparatively modern, which seem to have a different character altogether in terms of like being integrated with daily life or not. And I'm just curious how Hinduism, because it has this unbroken thread in a way from the one to the other, how, like, by what kinds of mechanisms did the most ancient of the traditions get connected? Like, did it get folded in and its context lost a bit, or did it get folded in its entirety? Or I'm just functionally, I'm wondering how that got folded in, since it seems like there's a bit of contradiction there.
That's a great question as well. And I'll try to unpack it. And you're right, it's a really, really large. The arc on that question is so wide that I may not be able to cover it, but I will try to address some of that. Any other questions or comments? And again, if I say anything that is offensive or strikingly strange, we've already disclaimed ourselves with the opening prayer, which is, may there be no differences between us at the end of this class. During this class, it is absolutely okay to challenge me and ask me questions. That's the whole point of the disclaimer that we signed at the front end, which is, may our knowledge be radiant. Let there be, maybe work together with great energy. How will we release that energy? Through conversation, through churning. And it's really important that you ask. Great. So I got, yes, Teresa.
So maybe I misunderstood you, but at the beginning when you were talking about ways that the West may now be a little bit familiar with something in Hinduism, did you say virtual reality?
Yeah, I'll talk about that. That's a great question. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, Berdu, yes.
Could you speak a little bit later about the how Hinduism holds the LGBTQ community?
Yes. Okay. Good. Any other questions? Great. I promise to try to catch all of these questions. They are well within the range of topics I can cover in the time we have. But if I do miss, please remind me and I will try to catch that question. All right. Let's talk about, let's see. Just give me a second. I'm trying to move my screens around so you can see where I am. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about how I came to be what I am, which will hopefully give you an insight into how one becomes or practices Hinduism in that sense. Before that, I do have to apologize up front. I should have apologized at the front end. I'm sorry I don't look like this. Other than in Hollywood, this is the, of course, 1980s, very good movie, but very poor depiction of Hindus, because this is Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. This is actually a very famous Indian actor, Amrish Puri, and this is a depiction of Hinduism which is alien even to me. So I apologize for not looking like that, I guess. All right. Sliced bread is ubiquitous. Here's a bunch of ideas that I did want to talk to you about. You have heard the words dharma. You have heard the words yoga, asana, the idea of reincarnation, the words guru or a pundit on TV. All those words are directly from Hinduism. Karma, which for some reason everyone thinks is a female dog, which is not so. the idea of karma itself is a core part of Hinduism, and it's intimately connected to all the underlying philosophy of Hinduism, and in that sense, it's fun. But I wasn't always this way, and so I'm beginning to answer one of the questions in terms of the sort of the unbroken chain part, and also the exact opposite part that Joe you asked. Let me tell you first about myself. I grew up learning this map, which is this is Mr. Dorsey. This is Mr. Dorsey's school, and this is Find Canaan next to the Sea of Galilee. This is fourth grade moral science. I went to a Christian school all the way through elementary, middle, and almost till the end of my high school. So I was taught the Old Testament and the New Testament, and back home in India, I probably still have my Gideon's Bible at home. And so, and that it turns out that's very typical of people, that we're not taught Hinduism in school because, of course, it can't be taught, but we are taught other traditions in school. For example, my moral science class was all about the Old Testament, which was good. So the Hinduism I learned was from my parents, through reading, through my own practices as a yogi, and then a lot of reflection. Now let me tell you a little story. This story is a fun story. It's from the Panchatra. It's like Aesop's fables, but India's version. So there's Brahmin. Brahmins are essentially priests who would go from one place to another and do rituals for families. So this priest goes from his village to another village for conducting some rituals, and is given a goat as a gift. And so, of course, he's going to go back in the evening. So he slugs the goat on his shoulders and he heads on back to his village. But as he's heading out of the village, one man approaches him, and he says, "Hey, Pandit, why do you have a dog on your shoulder?" And the priest says, are you out of your mind? This here is a goat. It's not a dog, and you should probably get your eyes checked. He walks down a little, and another guy approaches him. He says, "Hey, priest, why do you have a donkey on your shoulders?" So now the priest says, you guys, what is this village? What's wrong with you people? That's obviously a goat. And he goes on. Third guy approaches him at the edge of this first village. "Hey, priest, why do you have a baby cow on your shoulders?" At this point, the priest is convinced that there is a problem not with the men of this village, but with the object on his shoulder. Clearly, this is a shape-shifting demon. So I'm going to throw this right away and run away. So he throws the goat down and runs away to his village, thanking God that his life has been saved from the shape-shifting devil on his shoulders. And that is a story about how you should, of course, let the crooks tell you what's what. To know who you are and what you have to look inside and not let somebody else tell you what you have. And a lot of times, Hindus that grow up in Hindu families tend to, especially the educated English-speaking variety of my kind, for example, are so alienated from the tradition that we now refer to Max Muller, a German from the 19th century, or his descendants, to read Hinduism back to ourselves. And often that image is not complimentary, far from it. The image is a very retrograde, very weird, and obviously unscientific tradition. And so people disavow the tradition because obviously this must be a shape-shifting devil of a tradition, and I have nothing to do with it. But the truth, of course, is you have to look at what you're carrying yourself and understand that. So let me tell you about my morning schedule. This morning I woke up, and as soon as I woke up, I sat down for my meditation, which involved pranayam, the breath work, and then long period of meditation. Chants were included. And then after taking a bath, I also did Qigong in the morning. After taking a bath, I went to my altar where there are images of deities and of gurus at my altar, and I practiced my morning prayers. While doing this, I chanted a 40-verse prayer to Hanuman, who's the monkey god in popular language, but who's a yogi. Then I chanted another verse from the Bhagavad Gita. Then I chanted another prayer to the goddess of wealth. Then I went outside and poured water to the sun, to the rising sun, and chanted a prayer to the sun, that he may illuminate my senses. And in all this, what I've described to you is many gods, many forms of prayer, many different rituals just in the morning. And I've just truthfully described the morning that preceded our conversation here today. A lot of memorization of verses that I may not even know the meaning of, but I'm going to memorize it. A lot of surrendering, a lot of ritual involving water, lamps, incense, other fragrant objects like saffron and sandalwood. All of these were involved in just the morning prayers. So prayers in the Hindu tradition are not things that you do on one day of the week. Being continuously in a state of recognition is our objective. But recognition of what? Recognition of the divinity present everywhere as everything. But these truths are obscured behind rituals and practices and forms and shapes. So, as a child, I was not taught through inference. My father did the same things that I just described, just for longer. Through osmosis, just being present in a tradition, I've incorporated them, imbibed them into myself, and I practice it. The truths unpack themselves later. Almost like, think of it as a strawberry or a mango. And I'm going to say mango because it's a sweeter fruit. The outside of which is this fleshy, sweet thing, the inside of which is a seed. The seed of which you can put into fertile soil, and when the time is right, a tree comes out, and eventually it fruits as well. So the tradition and the ritual is that fleshy exterior fruit. The seeds inside are the interesting parts, the procreative part, the generative part of this tradition. But the seeds are not obvious. Now, Joe, I'm coming directly to your question. And then, Mirlu, I will address your question about virtual reality right there. When I pray at the altar in front of images, my first act is to invoke that which is everywhere to please come in front of me, so I may pray to her or him. I invite them, invoke them to be present. I offer my respects. And what do I offer? Myself, of course, my entire self. I may offer water, leaves, fruits, flowers. It doesn't matter what I offer. What I'm really offering is my entire self. So I invite the divinity that's present everywhere into the form in front of me. And then I offer my prayers, and then I request them to go back everywhere. Because, of course, the reality in the Hindu tradition is that truth is everywhere. That divinity is everywhere as everything, including as our innermost self. So when I say namaste, for example, I am recognizing the divinity in you, the same divinity that animates me, animates you. And I recognize that, and I bow to your divinity, because it's what's inside me is inside you, and I'm just recognizing that. Nama means to bow. Te means you. I bow to you. And that's what it literally means. And so you see, the outer fleshy fruit of Hinduism, maybe sweet or fragrant or confounding or even idol worship looking. But the inner seed is what's the generative part. And the outer layer has continued to change over the thousands of years the tradition's been around. And now I'm on your question, Caitlin, which is, has the tradition evolved? The answer is it evolves all the time, but the underlying truths remain the same.
So do the old gods have equal status to the newer gods in the pantheon? It's just whatever form you wish to call it into?
Yeah. So yeah, that's a great question. One, the idea of a pantheon has been sort of, it's seen in modern science because again, this is Roman gods and Roman pantheon. A lot of times they're seen as like an Avengers type of deal where there's gods with powers and fighting each other and some sort of coalition against supernatural evil or something. That's not how the Hindu tradition looks at it at all. So first thing is, we do have multiple gods, but I'll explain my understanding of what those gods are, so that just so we're clear, because we use words and sometimes we use the same words but they mean different things to you than they do to me. So I'd like to unpack that. But your question is, have the old names and forms of gods continued over time, or do they have the same potency as they did before? Right? That is your question. I will address that. So the question is, how has the old tradition carried? That's a great question. Let me pull up the right slide just for fun. Okay. I'm going to go on a maybe 5 minutes detour, so you're going to have to stick with this arc, and I hope there will be a payoff at the end of it. So I'll go right on. Now, imagine yourself going back to middle school, right? Just go all the way back to middle school, and you're sitting in a class. And your teacher is asking the following question: why is a leaf green? Why is a leaf green? And if you're the student at the front end of the class and you're a studious variety, you're going to raise your hand and offer the following answer. Leaves are green because they absorb all the colors of the sunlight. Other than green, they're reflecting green light, and that's why they look green. Imagine failing for that answer. It's the right answer, but in the wrong class. Leaves are green because they carry chlorophyll. Of course, every elementary school kid knows that. Right? Leaves are green because they carry chlorophyll. Now, mathematicians and zealots agree on one thing. What do mathematicians and zealots agree on one thing? What is that one thing? One second, my images just went away. Right. They agree that there is one right answer for every question. And if you're in the wrong class, you got even the right answer, maybe the wrong answer. This reductionism that has been part of post-Enlightenment Europe, this Cartesian setup that's been set up, that has been the source of much problems. That there is one right answer for every question is a ridiculous proposition, even at its face. Even with a silly leaf example, I've shown you that there cannot be just one right answer. But if you go back to a lot of traditions that are about one right answer and the imposition of that one right answer on everyone, you recognize the world that exists today of people that have the right answer and people that don't have the right answer. And those that don't know the right answer must be taught the right answer or they're going to hell. But that's not how the Hindu tradition approaches it. Now, Caitlin, I'm coming directly to your question. I'm going to quote a scientist. This is a fun quote. There are trivial truths and then there are great truths. The opposite of a trivial truth is plainly false. But the opposite of a great truth is also true. Paradoxes are very important because the world is filled with paradoxes. What is a tradition that can understand paradoxes and digest those paradoxes? That must be the truth, which contains all the variations of truth inside it. Now, as I promised to you, I'm on to your question here, Caitlin. Caitlin, your question is the following. Just read the first 6 words of this paragraph. Reality is one, truth is one. And yet, the learned and the wise speak of it in many ways. The Sanskrit words for that are right here. Ekam sat vipra bahudha vadanti. The truth is one, and yet the wise know it by many names. This recognition that truth can be subjective, can be layered, and there is not just one single truth, but versions, layers, perspectives of truth. And recognizing the multiplicity of truth is core to this tradition. This verse goes all the way back to the Rig Veda. Thousands upon thousands. This is one of the earliest scriptures we remember. This verse is from that. But and Caitlin, now I'm directly staring at your question here. You're staring at the answer on your screen, which is this. These following gods are mentioned in this verse, or divinities rather, not gods. Indra, Mitra, Varuna, Agni, Divya, Suparna, Garutma, Agni and Yama, Matarishwa. These are all names of divinity, which a modern Hindu only recognizes maybe Indra, maybe Varuna, and mostly Indra. And Indra is just a minor form of, is a divinity, but not all of reality. Names have changed. The truth has not changed. This ability to be flexible with changing truths brings us to the subject at hand. Hinduism is known as Sanatan Dharma. There are 2 words in that particular construct. And now I'm right adjacent to Will, your question, so please listen accordingly. There are 2 words in this, Sanatan and Dharma. Imagine a center and a wheel going around it. Now, there are 2 objects of interest in this wheel. That which is at the center and that which is touching the floor at this moment. That which is at the center never changes. Sanatan means that which is eternal, that which is timeless. Not only is it timeless, it is before, outside of time. Something that's true on Monday, but not true on Wednesday, like the president of the country, cannot be truth. It's just a provisional truth. So what are those truths that never change? What are those truths that are not conditional upon anything? Guess what does not fall into the same category of truths? Me, you. There was a time when you were not there, and here you are, and there will be a time when you're not there in this shape, form, name, and substance. Therefore, what is your truth? What is your true nature? How are you and I going to discover our true nature? That pursuit is Sanatan, the search for truths that are beyond and outside of time. But then remember the part of the wheel that is touching the floor at any given point of time, that which is ever changing. Dharma. Dharma is that which holds everything together. One of the most complex words in the Dharmic tradition, definitionally, is dharma. That which holds things together is dharma. And that truth is ever changing. That truth is always evolving. And now you've got 2 versions of truth, that which is never changing and that which is ever changing. And in that set of paradoxes, all truths may be contained. That is Sanatan Dharma, and that is the self-referential name of the Hindu tradition. That search for eternal, timeless truths and the truths of what holds everything together. Dharma isn't just about religion or society or laws. Dharma is also about, gravity can be dharma. That which holds anything together is dharma. And because it's so subtle, because it's so fickle, so hard to understand, very imperceptible, it can only be known by the deepest meditative practices, the deepest connection to the self. So the Hindu tradition and generally all the traditions from that area evolved practices to examine and experience these truths. Those practices are ritualistic practices, the yogic practices, religious practices, legal practices, economic practices, relationship practices. All sorts of practices have evolved for the singular aim of understanding these truths and letting these truths flow through us. And now, Will, I'm directly at your question, and that is what makes Hinduism and Buddhism common. The distinction between Hinduism and Buddhism is actually not so much. There are differences in names and shapes and forms, but the underlying philosophical construct is very similar. Hinduism is a spectrum, and Buddhism falls squarely somewhere in that spectrum, somewhere towards the atheistic end of that spectrum, but still on that spectrum. Hinduism itself contains 6 philosophical schools inside it, 2 of which are completely atheistic, which is there is no God, or there is no need for a God to explain the true nature of reality, and to also to solve the underlying problem of suffering. You don't need an external variable to explain that, and so they're called atheistic. There are other traditions that are dualistic. There is a divinity, and there is this reality, material reality, and two are distinct. And then there are non-dual schools. The more popular philosophical schools that are more popular now are the non-dual schools, Advaita Vedanta. And then of those there are distinctions. There are specialized non-dual school, Vishishta Advaita. What that means is simply this: non-dual schools are simply saying the following: two, not two. And Advaita means not two. There are no two. What does that mean? That sounds kind of like the monotheistic assertion that there are no two gods. It is quite the opposite. What this no two is saying, not only are there no two gods, there are no two anything. It's all one. You and I are only provisionally different, indistinct. But in reality, we're part of the same underlying reality. We are really one. There are no two objects, no two subjects either. This intimate connection of ourselves is non-dual reality. The problem, now I'm coming down to your question, Merlu, that comes down to the idea of Maya, that all of this is an illusion, a play of illusion, or like the Matrix, Morpheus says, reality is a sort of illusion that's sort of laid out in front of our eyes. This reality where you and I are separate people, separated by physical forms and bodies, is an illusion. But you're going to say, but Gaurav, that's nonsense. Of course, I'm here and you're there. We're two separate people, right? That's until you think about the experience of being you. Where do you stop and where do I begin? Where do you stop and the rest of the universe begin? Is it at the edge of your skin? Is it the mass of chemicals that's inside? Is it your thoughts? Think about a pink elephant. I just inserted a new reality in your head. Where do you stop? Where does the rest of the world begin? Is a question that the more you think about it, the less the answer will appear obvious. But if you see with trained eyes, and a yogi would, Enlightened yogis, that's the whole project, is to see with eyes that are not conditioned by this understanding or separation. And when you see with those eyes, it's all one. There is no separation. There is a provisional self, but I recognize that all of this is myself as well. Now you might say, well, that's ridiculous. What a nonsense claim. Again, I challenge you, if you dream, and as Shakespeare said, to sleep, perchance to dream. If you sleep and when you dream, do you see other people? Show of hands if you don't see other people in your dreams. Everyone sees other people in your dreams, right? When you wake up, where are those people? You're like, well, those people, did they die? Did you kill them in your dream? In every dream, you go out and kill other objects? No, they disappear, they evaporate. There is a self in your dream, there are others in your dream, but when you wake up, guess what? Just like every good Hollywood movie, it was all a dream. All of those other people were you playing with yourself. You decided, I'm going to shroud myself, pretend to be other people, just like children do. When I pretend to be other people, I have to remember to forget that I am also other people, other things. That's how the game is interesting. That's why the dreams are worthwhile. Otherwise, it would be just, it's all me. What's there to see? And when you wake up, you recognize it's a dream. And that's what it means to be awakened. That's what it means to be a Buddha, to have woken out from that dream and recognizing the intimate internal connection of all ourselves. Alan Watts, well, I'm answering your question directly. Alan Watts famously said, Buddhism is Hinduism repackaged for export. It's export-oriented Hinduism. But it's not distinct. Distinction, again, I can come to it. I don't want to bore you with my philosophical sort of tirades, but distinction is not the concept in the Hindu tradition as much. But there is no distinction as such between Hinduism and Buddhism for that reason, which is the philosophical practices, the meditative practices, the dialogue processes are identical in these traditions because they're not separated at the root. When I use a word to talk to you, are you suggesting that I invented a word? The answer is obviously not. We cannot have a conversation until we share words in common. And so that language existed in those lands for thousands or upon thousands of generations, or you could argue it exists in all versions of humanity. And so Buddhism is, in that sense, not separate. Now, the Buddha did say at different stages of his life that there is no divinity, or there is no need for divinity, or there is divinity, but you don't really need to know or find your own answer. Those are, varyingly his answers, and the Hindu tradition finds all of those acceptable answers. And in that sense, it's a sort of spectrum thing. Now, let me just take a check. I have answered Joe's question, Will's question, Caitlin's question, Merilu's question. Merilu, are you satisfied with my answer? Because I did answer virtual reality, but I know it's one of those questions which is a sort of supercilious type arrangement where you have to raise an eyebrow and say, virtual reality, what does that mean? Did I answer your question?
Not sure, but I'd be interested if others would chime in.
Sure. Let me double down on my answer here. The concept in Hinduism is, and also Buddhism, is Maya. Maya, M-A-Y-A, just the way the word sounds. Maya, it is not there. The world happens to be an illusion. It is not there. But the problem is we have chosen to forget and play along with this illusion. And our project in this life, interestingly, so there is a concept of a twice born in Hinduism. These are people who are born again, similar to the Christian use of the term, but in this case, They're born again by becoming awake to this question: what is the true nature of reality? When the world appears not to be what it seems at first glance, then you want to pay attention to it and find out the truth. And that search for truth leads to an answer. Every seeker, every enlightened Buddha has reached the same answer, that the world is not as it appears. And there is an inherent internal connectivity to everyone and everything. And our conditioning leads us to believe that we are separated, but it is not so. Maya, it is not there. And that illusion, that understanding of illusion, of the interconnectedness of everything, leads to a very dynamic moral code. Because once you know it's all you, how would you treat everyone? Once you know that all of this earth, this universe is you and therefore essentially the same divine reality, how would you treat everyone? How would you treat the ecology? It leads to inescapable conclusions about how to operate in this world. And that's the fun part. Now, the interesting thing is, I say all this, but I do have a sense of irony at the back. The Hindu tradition appears the exact opposite of this. It appears to have myriad shapes and forms. I will take you to the temple and show you what's happening inside the temple. Oh my God, that looks so interesting. Caitlin, your dog looks like he's paying attention. Very seriously too. So I'm impressed. So the Hindu tradition appears to have myriad shapes and forms, confoundingly so. So many gods, so many things to remember, so much going on. And yet, the truth is that Hindu tradition says the truth is one and the wise know it by many names. So while the many names part seems obvious, the truth is one part seems obscured. But that's the fun part of being, of being in this tradition, that every day it unpacks something new. I'm going to pause and take a breather. It is indeed on the 1 hour mark, a little over. So now let's reassess where we are. Is this where you want to be in this conversation? Great.
Are you opening to other questions?
Yes, I'm opening to more questions, Benjamin.
The first one, I wasn't sure if Mary Lou was asking about LGP.
That was Mary, that was Teresa. I will get to Teresa's question. Yes.
Oh, okay. Okay. I had a question about the caste system and caste construct, and how that plays out, especially around people's sense of worth and self, and how people experience suffering and identity, and both kind of rootedness and strength, and also maybe a sense of diminishment.
Great question.
I have another question as well when you're ready.
I have to see. Oh, this is Kellen. Yes. Hi. Yes.
Hi. I was wondering how you felt about the appropriation of yoga and if you felt it was misappropriation or not.
Oh, no. It's fine. Please take it. No. I'm just kidding. Yeah. I will talk about it. Any other questions?
No question.
Kenji.
Just appreciation for your humor.
Thank you. Speaking of humor, I got canned jokes. Do you want to hear canned jokes? You want canned jokes? I got a can of jokes. Let's see.
But they better be really good.
Well, they're canned. They're probably canned for a reason. No promises are being made. But let me see. This is a class of jokes. You will recognize the speaker immediately because, of course, it is I. Okay. Let's hear this. Come on. Okay, yeah. Okay, this is taking too long. 1 second. Okay, let me stop sharing. Let me go to the better version of this set of jokes while we're here. Um, okay, the internets are not collaborating with me, so you can still see me, right? I'm just surprised why the internet is acting the way it is. Weird. Okay, sorry. Who knows what's going on? Okay, jokes will return when the internet has decided to cooperate with me. Um, all right. Appropriation of yoga, Teresa's LGBTQ question, and the caste system. All right. Let's talk about the LGBTQ question. Very important question in modern times. It's obviously a source of much sort of debate and concern in the modern world. The Hindu tradition, in general, the meditative, monastic parts of Hindu tradition generally don't like to have too much sex. It's not something that the yogis were actively engaged in. Some of the writers, people who wrote down the sacred scripture, often were married and had regular sex lives, I'd imagine. But other than that, sex only to have kids. Other than that, not so much. Not for procreate. I mean, non-procreative sex. Yeah, why would you waste your energy into that sort of nonsense? Has generally been the approach. But in general, the Hindu tradition, if you go back pre-Victorian times, is a sex-positive tradition. We don't have a problem with sex. If anything, there's a lot of it. Of course, there's 1.2 billion Hindus, but more than that, if you look at the fertility itself is considered a core part of the tradition. Of course, uh, if you look at Kama Sutra and the tradition where Kama Sutra comes from, of course, Hinduism, right? So Hindus in general, the Hindu tradition in general is quite open on the question of sex and gender identity. Uh, is this the paragon of virtue? Not so much. I can't think of any instance where this is a sort of it's. Let me just say, I'm going to say that it's been seen evenly, but I'm not going to say that it's been seen in a celebratory fashion. So I hope that's clear. Evenly, let me explain evenly. In the stories that have been passed down through the generations, there are many multiple, at least trans characters. People who change their gender identities are very common. In fact, two of the major dynasties in the Hindu tradition, the royal dynasties, there are two, the sun and the moon dynasties. Both are from a brother and sister pair. They did not marry each other. Thankfully, we weren't Roman. So the sun dynasty traces back to Ikshvaku, and that's where my people are from. But there's the moon lunar dynasty, and that's an interesting story because Ela would on alternate months be male, female, male, female, male, female. So very fluid gender identity, which is interesting. In the Mahabharata, one of the two major epics, there are characters that are trans, and it's a major plot line that the whole battle hinges upon one one major guy and his opponent who happens to be a trans character. And the plot line is that this major sort of this is the teacher of all the so this is the big warrior, big teacher. He says, I don't fight women. And because of that, he's killed. Because the only way to fight him is to go behind that trans character and kill him from there, because he won't fight this person. So you go kill him at that point. So that's an interesting plot line. So in general, and of course, if Shiva, you all know Shiva is one of the Hindus. Shiva is known as Ardha Nareshwara. Our own in the yoga tradition, right down the middle, female, male, are sort of multiple gender. This is not sex as much as gender, which is multiple ways of existence exist in the self, and Shiva himself is known as Ardhanarishwara, half man, half moon. One of the interesting stories in the tradition is where, um, long story, so I'm going to skip it, but Vishnu himself takes the form of a woman to beguile the two sides, because he needs to take away the nectar, the nectar of immortality, and he has to trap them away. So he takes the form of a woman. So gender identity tends to be rather fluid and sort of open. Whether people are having sex across genders, I'm not sure. It's not very clear to the scriptures I've read. Where it's not, again, celebrated, but it's not necessarily called out either. So I'm not very clear if that's said so in as many words. But the Kama Sutra does have sort of some combinations that I mentioned. So in that sense, I think there's general openness. Modern Indian tradition, on the other hand, has inherited a lot of those Victorian values. So it tends to be more prudish, but that's more recent. If you go back to even temple sculptures from 500 years ago, there's a lot of openness and frankness with the body. Our goddesses will be full chested. They will not be hiding themselves. They'll be completely bare, and that's completely acceptable in the Hindu tradition. It's just that post-Victorian and before that culture before, and then the British for 200 years. So there's a lot of inherited sort of values, but the older Hindu tradition tends to be very open, very very fluid, just super fluid. There's another interesting plot line, just so that I'm telling you. One of the two picks, I said Mahabharata, right? The lead archer, so this is the MVP of the team. The whole Mahabharata is the story of two cousins fighting, but the entire world is arrayed. All the armies are arrayed on both sides, and essentially it's an internal family war about what is the right thing to do, about dharma itself. But never mind that. The winning side, spoiler alert, their key archer, so their main warrior, they have a condition imposed upon them that they have to live 1 year in under disguise. So he disguises himself as a woman, as a trans person, and as a dance teacher for 1 year. That's the condition of their banishment. So he has to live in disguise or unknown, and he disguises himself as a woman, as a dance teacher, and of course that's how he finds his next wife, which is he teaches his wife how to dance, and then later he comes back into his original shape, and they live happily ever after for maybe a couple of years. So in that sense, to answer your question, finally, there is openness and acceptance. I cannot say for certain if it's celebrated or condoned. It doesn't come up in the stories I've read. But there's a very wide fluidity and openness in the Hindu tradition, traditionally. But for that, you're going to have to look further back than the Muslim and sort of British periods of India to truly see what the tradition has to say. Now let's get to the big question, Benjamin, that you had about the caste system. What is the caste system, and how does it inform the sense of worth, of the suffering, and a sense of identity, or even a sense of diminution in the self in light of who I am and who my people are, right? That is a great question, and it's one of those civilizational questions. Let me again take a long walk to get to the answer. The word caste is a fascinating word because it's a word that you're familiar with from another side. You're familiar with this word from the other word, chastity, purity. And you know very well what chastity means. Racial purity, right? It is a Portuguese word for casta, which leads to ideas of racial purity amongst the European elite. Now remember, the 1% and the 99% are a part of European reality, right? And the European elite are trying to make sure their bloodlines are pure. And their word for that is casta. And now proselytizing and colonizing Europeans enter other countries. They go to Africa, they go to India, they go to America, kicked out of America, then go to India and double down on their colonization initiative. Same gentleman, by the way, Lord Clive, goes from here to India and sets up the whole colonizing mission. Now their project is to take this really complex, really expansive, and seemingly proud tradition and try to make sense of it for two reasons: subjugation and conversion. That's the colonial project in every country they went to: subjugation and conversion. So, how do you subjugate and convert people? Just the way you would with a witness protection plan, give people fake noses, mustaches, and glasses, and new names and identities. You give them fake histories and stories in a way that sets into motion a separation that will create generations of civil war. Why are the Africans fighting each other? Hutus and Tutsis are probably the identical looking people, but they're fighting each other because the colonial masters told them, oh, no, you guys are separate, you have to fight each other. Divide and conquer is part of the Roman strategy from 2000 years ago. It's worked because that's how colonizers worked. The Romans did that to European people. The European people did that to every place they colonized. How do you divide and conquer? So when they came to India, to recap, their project is to now see, how do I make sense of this seething mass of people? And they see that and India is a society that had been long under decline at that time, 800 years of decline at this time. So obviously, when any society is in decline, stratification of classes is deep and ingrained in that society. For example, let me see if I can pick it up. I live in a city in the Bay Area. It's a suburb. I'm not proud of it. It is a suburban city. And there's an interesting thing that happens in this city. There is a type of map that you can look up on the internet that shows you the racial structure of any zip code by having people of different dots of different colors show up in that region. So if it's black, then it's one color; Hispanic another color; Asian another color; Indians are included in Asian. White is another color. You look at the city I live in, as I did, I found something really surprising. A couple of miles down the road from where I live, I found a rectangular shaped structure, or what looked like a structure, with dots that were differently colored, differently from the rest of the city, but highly concentrated with dots representing two types of colors, black and Hispanic. Can you tell me what those dots, what that area might be? A rectangular colored shaped structure. No prizes for guessing. You already know what the answer is. It's a penitentiary, a jail, a holding area. Degree of incarceration in this country for Black and Hispanic people is off the charts. Off the charts. And you can see that in just 2 miles down the road. I live next to the Santa Rita jail, it turns out. And so the point I'm getting to is a society in long periods of decline will have stratification that is now deeply ingrained in the culture. Incarceration of people of a certain ethnic minority, for example, is popular here. One colored people versus another colored people is popular here. And this country has just been around for 400 years. So imagine if this country had been around for 4,000, 6,000, 10,000 years, and now in decline. So when the Europeans come to India, Benjamin, I am trying to answer your question eventually, is they come to a society in some sort of a decline and with deep stratification. An actively vibrant society has stratification, but it's always in churn. A person whose parents thatched the roof of mud huts, a thatcher, can become a prime minister in a country that has vibrancy. A coppersmith cooper can become prime minister, right? Or president or whatever. A good society, a vibrant society, has a lot of churn going on. A society in decline has stratification that is deep rooted. So when the British came to India, they saw a society in some sort of a quasi state that sort of mimicked their own caste system of three layers: the serfs, the whatchamacallits, the ruling class, and the people in the middle, the moneyed class, the bankers, and so on. They had a three-layered society. They come to India, they find a four-layered society, and the question they ask is, all right, what must I name thee? And they now reinvent Hinduism by saying, oh no, it's a really deep-rooted part of Hinduism. This four states of being is a deep-rooted part of Hinduism is patently false. But when the British came to India, that's the caste system that they invent out. And then in 1800s, they run a survey, a census, and ask people to choose which caste they are. So here's a funny story, true story. My family, like I told you, trace ourselves down to the solar dynasty. Therefore, we're sons of rulers, right? So we would theoretically form part of the warrior caste. But the business we were doing in the 1800s, as a lot of my family does, is banking, trading. We're essentially traders. And so in 1800s, we had to pick what you remember or what you do. And so we picked what we do. We had to pick one because that's what the census man says. So we picked we're a trading community. So we're now considered a part of the trading caste. So the point I'm getting to is, now Benjamin, to answer your question, the caste system is not a part of Hinduism, number one. It is part of the Hindu society. Christians, Muslims, Hindus, Sikhs all practice some sort of discrimination. In India, there is discrimination for all sorts of reasons. You will recognize some of these yourself. Whether you speak English, whether you speak English with a British accent, whether you speak English with an American accent, are all signifiers of a certain status in society. Right? India is, like any old society, a highly discriminative society. Again, every society that's been in stasis or is in decline is going to have that sort of discrimination. But in general, the Hindu, so Benjamin, I'm going to come to your answer right just now. The Hindu tradition in general has a separation of people into four types. That's not the same thing as a caste system because it just says there are people who like to work, there are people who like to think, there are people who like to trade, there are people who like to get shit done, so to speak. And once you said there's four type of people, and you do what is right for your inner self. That's one sort of distinction in the Hindu tradition. This is true. That is, it's called Varna. Jati is the family tradition you're born into. I'm going to ask you the following question. George H.W. Bush and George W. Bush share more than their names in common. What's common to them is, of course, the presidency. Why is George W. Bush and George P. Bush and Jeb Bush, why are they politicians? Because their father was. Because the father figured out how to be successful and he taught his sons how to be successful or whatever. Connections. That's how families would pass on. Now, the Coopers were coppersmiths. Goldsmiths were goldsmiths, obviously. Thatchers were thatching roof, and so on and so forth. Tailors were tailors. I mean, come on. So you can see families would pass on their occupational knowledge to their children. Two separate things I've talked about. Jati is the family you're born into and the trade and tradition of your family. And Varna is your inner nature. Those are part of the Hindu tradition. But the caste system is a solid mishmash of nonsense invented by the British. Now, even if it's nonsense, the effects are real. The sense of worth, it turns out, between someone who's in the higher caste and the lower caste, there is a distinction. There is discrimination in the Indian society. But there are poor Brahmins. Brahmins are the priestly class. Most Brahmins I know are really poor. They're not the sort of people that Martin Luther wrote his 93 edicts against. These are not wild, vapid, people who are, whatever, charging money for rituals. No, no. These are people whose tradition is remembering, rituals and conducting those rituals for donations. And so they can't earn other than by donation. That's the tradition. And so obviously they're either very rich or very poor, depending on how people donate and so on. So sense of worth is directly linked to the caste, but it's very complex. And from the outside, it might seem, oh no, this is a bad system. Great, you would think that if you want to convert people, because it's a very useful way to convert people to say, oh no, you're oppressed. But people are oppressed for a variety of reasons. Access to education, access to wealth, access to political connections are also reasons why people get oppressed. And the effects are real. The suffering and the sense of identity are very real. That is true. And generations of poverty, generations of lack of access to education has been a problem. Increasingly in the last few hundred years. Previously, if you had wealth, that wealth transferred to your kids. So wealth gave you a certain class in society. Education in the last 300 to 500 years has now become a very important part of status in society. And certain communities in India are more open and have more access to education than the others. I, for example, grew up in a household that did speak English fluently. So I had access to English education, and here I am, right? Access to education is important. And again, I'm not saying access to English is a great thing. I think it's a disservice to people in India. Now I'm coming to your question on appropriation very shortly. But the point is, the effects of caste discrimination are real, just the way the effects of color discrimination are, of education discrimination are, of capability and access discrimination are. Access to education discrimination. All of those are ways of discriminating, and the effects are very real, and every society must act to rebalance these stratifications of the society, because otherwise your society becomes immobile. There is no upward mobility in that society, and it becomes an older, dying society. So even in the Hindu tradition, there have always been drives. Buddhism, you could argue, was one of those drives to reinvent Hinduism, because every once in a while, all manner of nonsense would accumulate, and you'd have to reboot your computer, so to speak. And these drives have always been going on in Hinduism, as they do in, I'm sure, all reformist traditions. So, caste system is not core to Hinduism. There are other nuanced explanations that I've explained to you, but it is a very useful ploy for separation of people. And India is still suffering. Even now, as you speak, you can look at India. People are still sort of fighting over caste. Tremendous. But that's part of the colonizers' project, to divide and conquer. And Hindus are trying hard to get away from that, because again, it's also a stick to beat Hindus with. The sixth grade school books that kids are taught here, they'll show other religions as being, oh, here's a rich tradition, here's this rich thing. You look at the Hindu 4 pages, 1.2 billion people get 4 to 6 pages, and what do they show? Oh, this poor guy next to a dung heap. Oh, this poor thing, this poor cow. This guy is being discriminated against. All the richness and wealth of this tradition, and what you're going to show for it is Slumdog Millionaire. That's ridiculous. It's just bad education, but it's ingrained. Kids are taught this here, kids are taught this everywhere else. And it is not so. It is not so by a wide margin. But that's the comic book version of the religion that people are taught here. Again, colonizer and conversions project. Very classic. Now, why would you convert? Because you think our truths are not good. We have subjective truths. But the truth is, we are open to all the versions of truth. And that's why Hindus find it very confusing. If you ask Hindus to be tolerant, We don't have anything to be intolerant of. Everyone's truth is okay. Atheists are welcome in the Hindu tradition. Atheism is completely acceptable. If my kid were to say they are spiritual but not religious, it would make no difference to me, frankly. Why? As long as they're spiritual, what else is there for them to learn? And in that sense, it's the widest, sort of most accepting tradition that you might find. This is my perspective. Again, I'm offering you a solid sort of defense from my perspective. Again, your mileage may vary. Questions or comments? Now let me talk about appropriation of yoga. Great question. And I know this week Marian told me it has been discussed elsewhere as well. So I'm going to come to the question of appropriation. Let me tell you a few things, a few words, and you tell me what they mean. Karma. And you think karma is what comes back to bite you in the ass. Of course. Right? And that is actually not the meaning of karma by a wide margin. But if you didn't know what it means, this is what you think it means. Look at the word Zen. What has Zen come to mean to you? Long sitting, of course. Steve Jobs, maybe. Some sort of a mystical, contemplative practice and minimalist architecture. Those are the sort of things you think about when you think of Zen. But the Japanese word Zen comes from the Chinese word Chan. The Chinese word Chan comes from the Sanskrit word Dhyana. I'm a yogi. I practice and teach dhyana meditation, and it is more than just a matter of aesthetics. But when you transmit it, progressively information gets lost. I'll give you another thing here. And again, this is a trigger warning. If you're Jewish, I promise you I come in peace. If you're a person who is against supremacy of any sort, I'm with you. So I have already said it. I'm showing you a symbol of sacredness in the Hindu tradition. But I will show you, I guarantee you, you're going to gasp and you're probably going to complain. You ready not to complain? Some of you already know what I'm about to show you.
Yeah.
I get a new car, and in the Hindu tradition, like I know the Catholics as well, you get the car blessed. It's what you do. So I go to the temple to get the car blessed. And then I have to come home and wash the car. Why? Because my priest has put a holy symbol on my car that if I walk around my neighborhood, drive around my neighborhood, they're going to call the cops. I'm already bald. They already think I'm a skinhead. I have this symbol on my car. This is a holy symbol to me, my people, to the Buddhist people, to the Jain people. This is a holy symbol, swastika. But guess what? Some random European goes out, steals my symbol, and now I have to hide it from my kids.
It's a different direction too.
Both directions are fine. In the Hindu tradition, you'd have both. Both are acceptable. One more than the other. One's called, swastika, and the other is swastika. But they're both holy, depending on who's, if it's left facing or right facing. You're right, Celia. But the point is, it's a holy symbol, not just to my tradition. Caves from 30,000 years ago have this symbol. It's a symbol of fertility, of reinvention, all sorts of sacredness. But some random guy with a funny mustache decides to steal it, and now I can't have it on my car to bless my car with. That's
true of the Navajos.
Huh?
The Navajos have the same.
Exactly, yeah. The Navajos too. It's a very sacred, even the Roman temples have it. It's a very sacred symbol. But now we're hiding it because some random guy has misused it and I can't use it. And my people weren't even involved in it. Navajo people were not involved in it. Why should we have to hide our symbols? Because they've been appropriated, misappropriated, misused, and made nonsense of. And it's just not that simple. You look at yoga. I say yoga and you're thinking stretchy pants. Right? Yoga is the union of the lower self to the higher self. It's the highest, sacred, most sacred of practices and philosophies. But what have we made for it? Stretchy pants. A commercial enterprise. Is that appropriation? Yeah, of course it is appropriation. But But that's what it is. This is what the modern world is. And Hindus are not the only ones suffering. Everyone suffers. I'm sure the Italian people are complaining that their pizza looks like nothing else because they went to Chicago and had the deep dish and they're thinking, what is this monstrosity? Right?
And the Chinese would say the Italians stole it from them.
Oh, yeah, there you go. Yeah, for sure. There's so much of this going back and forth. Modern culture has been this sort of this mix and match of things, and I mean, you look at fortune cookies. I mean, another thing that doesn't exist in China but does in Oakland, and what are you going to do about it, right? So there's appropriation going around. Am I angry at it? No. Would I like to co-opt it? Yes. But here's the thing that confuses the heck out of me. I'm a yogi. I write and I speak about yoga and the philosophy of yoga, but I go to the Barnes and Noble, some of those that exist. I go to the yoga and philosophy section. 99% of the books are not by Indian people. They're by people who have gone to a yoga school, learned it, have understood a very thin sliver of what the tradition is, and have now written books. So what happens is progressively the message is diluted and diluted and diluted. And then surely Disney is going to make a movie about it, and then it's all downhill from that point on. Right? And that's what happens to every good tradition. And there is appropriation, but it's part of the modern world. And I'm not sure if being angry is an especially useful way of handling it. All we can do is just, just send out a pure light in all directions and hope that people who want the pure light will come and find you. What else are you going to do? The internet is going to make a mess of everything. That's just the way these things work. So, I mean, we're kind of sanguine about it. I'm just So, Caitlin, did I answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Sure. Okay. Oh, let's talk about. Okay, what is the time now? It's 10:40.
Can we take a break?
Yes, I was going to take 2 breaks. Now we're down to 1 break. We'll take a 10-minute break, and I promise I'll make the jokes work at that time. Let me go find the video and make it work. 10 minutes break. We're back in 10 minutes from now, which is at the 10:50 mark on Pacific time. Meanwhile, I'm here if you want to chit chat, gossip about the weather. I'm absolutely present.
No, but everybody here must know the joke about what the monk said to the hot dog vendor.
Make me one with everything. Make me one with everything, of course.
Thank you for your humor. I'm Japanese American, and studying Zen in the world religion text was really lovely. It's like, oh, okay, this sternness and all this control has a reason.
Oh, yeah.
I had a great Unitarian joke for you.
Oh, do.
Go ahead, yes.
Why should you never piss off a Unitarian?
Why?
Because after he gets pissed off, he'll come to your house and burn a question mark on your wall.
Will, what do you get when you cross a Unitarian with a Jehovah's Witness?
No clue.
Someone who knocks on your door for no reason. Got one more. What happened when a Unitarian dies and goes to heaven? There's this big giant banner that says, "Welcome to heaven." Over in the corner, there's a little coffee table that says, "Unitarians, come over here and have a cup of coffee and argue about whether there's a heaven or hell."
Yeah.
Pretty.
Well, I went to a Unitarian church for a while and left.
Yes. Okay, I'm gonna go walk around.
Now, I am going to give you 30 more seconds and then we'll begin. Now, Hindu ideas are all around, and without knowing it, you might already be a Hindu. Here's how to find out. You might be a Hindu if you've used this pickup line. Yeah, no, it didn't work out in that life either. You might be a Hindu if back in high school you had a dream. In that dream, your priest said, "You're not going straight to hell for not believing in God." You never told anyone about that dream. You might be a Hindu if back in high school you told your mom, "I only believe in science." She wasn't having any of it, right? Show me your AP Science grades. You might be a Hindu if your yoga teacher welcomes you with a Namaste and you hang back after class to correct the pronunciation. Hi, excuse me, it's Namaste. Thank you. You might be a Hindu if Wes Anderson announces his next movie and you're like, "I would like my ashes to be sprinkled in the Pacific Ocean." You might be a Hindu if you voted yes on "Are we living in a simulation?" The Matrix certainly does not have you enlightened Buddhas. You might be a Hindu if after yesterday's elections you thought, "Oh my God does not adequately cover all the gods that should be asked to set things right." You might be a Hindu if you hear Apu from Simpsons say, "Thank you, come again," and wondered if he was talking about reincarnation. And that is how you know if you might be a Hindu. Thank you and welcome back.
That was very good, by the way. Props.
Thank you. I have good writers. All right, all right. So we've covered lot of distance. I haven't told you the first thing about what Hindus believe and what don't, and what on earth happens at a temple, and more importantly, for your career as a spiritual director or as a chaplain, what happens when you meet a Hindu? What's going on in their life, and how can you help them? So I'm going to take a few minutes to talk you through um, uh, through what Hinduism is and how Hindus practice, and then I'll tell you a little bit more about how Hindus should, and this I because I'm the dean of the program at the Hindu Community Institute, how we're looking at spiritual direction from the perspective of the Hindu tradition. So I'll tell you a little bit more about that. Now, first thing is, remember I talked about Newton and standing on the shoulders of giants, and we've covered this earlier on, which is this is quite literally the shoulder of giant. It's a story, I think, in one of the Bible stories. I don't know, but this is certainly an illustration in the Bible, and this is the illustration that Newton thought of, and he said, if I've seen further, it's by standing on the shoulders of giants. The problem with propagation of deep ideas is deep and intense. I'll give you an example. E equals mc squared. What does it mean to you? How do you tell your kids about E equals mc squared, that energy can come from matter and that this energy can be explosive? To arrive at this level of science took thousands of years of scientific progress for Einstein to then say E equals mc squared, right? But only one guy, and possibly 12 other people around him, understood what it truly meant. But popular culture still has to transmit this information. All of us must know these truths and be able to transmit it. So, how on earth was E equals mc squared transmitted to future generations? Well, I have three words for you. Those words are duck and cover. E equals mc squared of the people, right? How you tell kids about E equals mc squared is there is a nuclear explosion, and when that happens, you're going to have to duck and cover. Hide yourself, kids, because this thing is going to raise everything to the ground, right? Stories, aphorisms, memes, and yes, laws are ways to convey these deep findings of science, of philosophy, of engineering. How do you convey it to popular culture? How do you transmit it to future generation? If everyone needs a PhD from this university in Prussia to understand E equals mc squared, only 5 of us would know what it means. But all of us must know, and so that can cover. And that is interestingly how Hindu tradition, what you find in popular Hindu tradition is the duck and cover of the E equals mc squared. What you see is the duck and cover. What you have to infer is that these guys know about E equals mc squared. And that's what I'm going to show you a little bit of. Okay, look. And this accumulated wisdom can be lost. It could be lost in the library at Ephesus, the temple at Nalanda, the statues at Bamiyan, or the other universities everywhere else that were burnt down by zealots. Because previous knowledge has to be destroyed for my one truth that everyone must understand and accept. And so accumulated wisdom can be lost. But that's not why we're here. We're here because a lot of accumulated wisdom has traveled. And I'm here to tell you, and this is your question way back when, Kidlin, your first question was, by what mechanism has this transmitted? I'm here to give you the good news. The good news is it's been transmitted through stories, celebrations, heroes, gods, art, and high philosophy. All these ways, when you celebrate Holi, the festival of colors, good-looking people, the festival of colors, you're not just celebrating color. You're celebrating the passage of time. You're celebrating a ritual of fertility that goes back all the way back to the Celts and the Druids before them. Fertility. When you celebrate, this is the famous Beatles ashram in Rishikesh, by the way. When you Go to a meditation class. You're now learning from a long line of yogis going thousands of years back. When you hear the stories of the Bhagavad Gita, the Hindus have a really interesting way of communicating our tradition through stories. That's not news, but we have epics. Those epics are not merely stories that are historical. They're bearers of dialogue. And I find this super interesting because essentially they're dialogues about the true nature of reality. It's kind of crazy. It's about how to conduct yourself. And the way these epics are laid out, it allows us to have a bird's eye view or a ringside view at different conversation. A weaver talking to the king, a forest sprite talking to a warrior, asking him questions and saying, I'm going to drown you in this lake unless you tell me the right answer, a quiz of some sort. And it's almost always bearing philosophical information encoded in a story. And so all of Mahabharata, all of Ramayana are really about the true nature of reality and how to conduct yourself in light of that true nature of reality. But encoded in stories, encoded in popular culture, encoded in a meme format which has transmitted over thousands of years, thousands of generations even. Stories travel, songs travel, philosophies die out very quickly because they're so hard to explain. Philosophy is dry. And so the way to think about Hinduism is to think of it as either a strawberry or a mango. Some truth with a lot of flesh inside it, or mango-like, which is more the Hinduism that I have come to learn, is a lot of fleshy, sweet, very interesting stuff outside, but a deep kernel of truth inside. And because the flesh is sweet, the fruit travels further and spreads out wide and puts out its tentacles into newer and newer areas. And that's how the Hindu tradition has transmitted. It's not merely the shapes and forms of the gods, but the stories those gods encapsulate. Now let me come to the idea of multiple gods. And of course, true to style, I will tell you a story. I was watching this documentary, it's a BBC documentary about people in Pakistan. Uh, Not related to the whole thing, but what caught my attention was this one guy who had gone from Pakistan to Sweden. And he's now reflecting, this is an illegal immigrant, he walked, and now he's reflecting on his journey. And he says, and he has tears in his eyes because he felt loved by the people of Sweden. Now he's describing his first 6 months in Sweden. And he says, I lived a scared man because everywhere I went, I saw the police. I went into the bus, there was a police. I looked outside my house, there's the police. I saw on the street, there is the police. Everywhere I went, there was the police. And I was really scared for myself. They are going to find me and they'll send me back. But then he said, in 6 months, I began to learn. And I began to see, oh, this is the bus conductor. That's the postman. This is the traffic guard. That is the police. Once you've let your eyes settle in the dark, images and shapes and everything becomes clearer, and you're now able to see more distinct shapes and forms. If you've been in the divinity business for thousands of years, you can't say, I love the universe. It's too broad. You can't love the universe. There's too much going on. Right? When you say this country has a government, you're also saying this country has a post office, a police system, a traffic system, the taxation system, and the guy in the White House. All of these are parts of government. When you've been in a place long enough, you recognize that when you say the country has a government, you recognize the government has different departments and functions. Those functions and departments must be given a name. How else do you talk about things other than by giving it a name and form? And then you come to the idea of multiple divinities. One truth, one idea of government, but many different forms. A god for wisdom, a god for removing obstacles, a god for this and that. Recognizing that these are not pantheon like. Caitlin, I'm coming back to your question. They're not warriors fighting for space or jostling for political favor. They're simply ways for us to understand divinity. Because you can't just say, I'm spiritual but not religious and I love the universe. You can't love the universe. It's too abstract, too broad, too all encompassing. You do this for several generations. You're going to say, one part of the universe is the market forces. I love market forces. God, I love my market forces. May the market forces be in my favor. One part of the universe is the relationship I have with my friends. Oh God, I love my relationships. May our relationships be kind. One part of the universe is all the consciousness that makes everything comes to life. When I die, only thing that happens is my consciousness departs from this body. The rest of the body is the same. So what makes this body auspicious is my consciousness. Otherwise, it's a dead body. And so what's all auspicious is the one singular consciousness that animates me, you, and everything else. That singular consciousness must be auspicious and must be an object of veneration, is it not? I've given you English descriptions for Hindu gods and goddesses. The goddess of wealth is the goddess of the markets. She moves wealth to where the market is and wants to move. She can also remove wealth for the same reason. And you want the markets in your favor, do you not? You want auspiciousness in everything that's living. And the Sanskrit word for auspicious is Shiva. Shiva, of course, is a god in the Hindu pantheon. That ultimate reality pervades everything. Everything is infused in the sweetness of existence. How would you know that which pervades everything? Well, one Sanskrit word for that which pervades everything is Vishnu, that which pervades everything. That becomes the name of a god. You see where this is going? That which is dark and all attractive, to which everything comes and from which everything comes and to which everything goes, is dark and all attractive. Our work for attraction, our word for dark and attraction is Krishna. You see how these concepts are also our understanding of divinity. They're not separate political gods fighting for factional space or market share. It is one singular reality. But now that we've been around in this business for long enough, God, I love the universe is not enough. In that sense, the English word God, which I think comes from a Persian word, khota, which comes from a Sanskrit word, swata, autonomous, self. The word God is such a misnomer that frankly, by that definition of God, even I'm an atheist. Do I believe there's an old bearded gentleman 60 miles up in the sky looking at my every action and judging me? No, I don't believe that. And so yeah, sue me, call me an atheist if you must. But that's such a narrow definition of God to deny. It's a straw man God that obviously people are going to deny. That definition of God is by definition a weak definition, right? I know it's a pun. But when you get to it, what is God? God must be that which makes everything auspicious, makes everything come to life, that which everything is made of and everything comes from and goes. God is time himself. All time comes from God. All of those ideas of God cannot be contracted and crunched into one three letters word, God. There must be other ways of understanding divinity. That's what the Hindu tradition is. Very vast, very nuanced, very sophisticated ways of understanding divinity. But go back to duck and cover. It's so sophisticated that people just cannot understand it. So how do you tell everyone about the truth? you Disneyfy it, you simplify it, you iconify it in a way that the fruit is sweet and fleshy, and everyone carries it, and eventually it sprouts and grows in themselves as a tree of knowledge and wisdom. Everyone then unpacks the truth in their own way, so long as the fruit travels, right? And that's what the Hindu tradition has been about. So you see the outward manifestation, and you might see variety and complexity, but the truth is very simple. There are many simple ways we've described it. Satchidanand is one of them. Sat is truth, Chid is consciousness, Ananda is this deep unconditional bliss. Truth, consciousness, unconditional bliss is all of reality. Satchidananda. They're all reality. The truth of all reality is an unconditional consciousness which is always in bliss. That's how we transmit our tradition. Through dances, through song, through festival, through fasts, through ritual, but ultimately leading and pointing back invariably to the same truth of the interconnectedness of each of us. Now, pause for questions, and then I'm going to go on a really, really long walk, so you're going to have to brace for that. The spiritual direction and Hinduism storyline. Any questions or comments so far before I get into it? Any feedback? Is this what you wanted? Is this what you came for? What's going on? Yes, I have.
I just wanted to loop back from something that we were talking about earlier and just offer to that people are interested. There's a book called Shikhandi and Other Queer Tales They Don't Tell You.
Shikhandi,
which is so I can put it in the chat, but it's by a man named Devdat Padanayak, and he looks at a number of stories from written and oral traditions in Hinduism and reads it through a queer lens. He's cis and gay, so I can't speak to like how he understands transness, particularly in terms of just like accepting the gender identities as they are rather than as like a form of deception. But that being said, there's a number of stories in there, and he I thought I'd also offer. He says to appreciate this fluidity of nature and the shifting rigidities of cultures, to appreciate queerness. So I'll put that in the chat, but I just wanted to make that offer.
Fantastic. Thank you for that, Hal. Fluidity is again, like I said, big core to Hinduism, non-judgmental. Now let's talk about a few things that Hindus believe in before I take you on the long walk. Hindus generally, there are, like I said, 6 major philosophical traditions, each of which would debate the heck out of each other and so on, but they're all integral sort of to the spread of Hinduism. To spread as in reach, not like philosophical. It's a non-proselytizing religion, frankly. What do Hindus believe? Generally speaking, these all have these things in common. The interconnectedness of all reality is well understood. There is some debate on the following: is the world real, and do I exist for real? On those 2 questions, there's been some debate. Brahma Sat, Jagan Mithya, or Brahma Sat, Jagat Sat are sort of is there a reality and this world is an illusion? Or there is a reality and this world is also there, it's not much of an illusion. Those are philosophical differences. Reincarnation is one of the core beliefs in Hinduism. I was going to do a breakout, but I've overspoken, so I'm not going to do it. I was going to talk about reincarnation and how understanding reincarnation and karma is to understand the philosophical and moral framework of Hinduism. Who you are, for what family you're born, how tall you're going to be, how smart you're going to be, how educated you're going to be, a lot of those are determined by the accident of your birth, the lucky sperm, so to speak, right? Now, the question is, if 90% of my truths my reality is based on the accident of my birth, why am I trying to find reason in the remaining 10%? It's all random, come on. But is it random? For the world to make sense, you have to understand that there are rules that must be inferred about this world, how the world works. Those rules are the rules of karma, that action must have an equal and opposite reaction. But you cannot understand karma in one life because Obviously, there are mean people that are rich and die rich and happy. And there are good people that die poor and suffering. Surely, right? So you cannot understand this law of give and take until you also understand that the accident of birth is no accident, and therefore reincarnation is a very necessary conclusion. That this is a forever game of back and forth, and therefore, what you put out eventually comes back to you. And so you better put out good stuff, essentially. So karma and reincarnation is a generally accepted belief. Do the Hindus believe in sin and lack of sin? No, Hindus in general do not believe. There are words for sin, papa and punya, but they mean different things in the Hindu tradition. So Hindus might accidentally tell you that they believe that there is sin. It is not so. Papa and punya mean different things. The one sin, if you could use the word in the Hindu context at all, is that of identification with the self. The fact that this body I think is me is the only sin, because every sin, every confusion stems from this identification with this. What Hindus believe, what I believe is this is a shirt and I can get rid of this shirt and put on a new shirt. This physical form is also a shirt I can put on. I get a new shirt when the previous one is torn out, and therefore, why am I wedded to this shirt? Why am I so holding this shirt so dearly? I'm going to get a new one next time. And so to that extent, the moral framework is very different. Do Hindus believe in a heaven or hell? The answer is yes, surprisingly. Hindus do believe in a heaven and hell, except it is not arbitrary and eternal. Two very important differences. One, it is a part of a process, an evolutionary process, and it's not eternal. Even heaven, if you do go to those seven heavens, you do come back, except if you've merged back into the ultimate reality in some schools. So to that extent, there is no permanence in the afterlife, because obviously if you just toss a coin once and you say no soup for you and you're going to get soup, it sounds kind of arbitrary, doesn't it? Unfair even, and frankly terrifying. And terror is not a part of the Hindu sort of thought process. Guilt and terror are not how the system works. Self-discovery is by giving each of us the ability to exercise self-will and to truly understand what our sort of aims in life are and what our decisions and choices are, to own up our own choices, not out of habit, but out of being fully aware of them. I'm covering a lot of distance, so I apologize for that. I'm covering a lot of ground philosophically in what I'm just telling you. One of the biggest, one of the most holy sort of epic scriptures in the Hindu tradition is the Bhagavad Gita, which is essentially a 700 verse compilation in the middle of a battlefield. It's almost as if you have a long running series of sort of, like Game of Thrones or something. There's a climax building up, and right before the climax, somebody freezes the action and starts to sing. 700 words of song and a conversation. Bhagavad Gita literally means the song of God. And the essence of that singing conversation is simply this. One guy, remember the guy who turned into a female dancer for 1 year? That guy, at the beginning of the battle, an all-out battle where 4.5 million people are going to die, minus 10. At the beginning of that battle, has suddenly discovered that the opposite side is his friend, his uncle, his father-in-law, his teacher. They're all his people. And he's going to have to kill them all. And he's having a giant case of cold feet and panic. Now, in pretty much every tradition, you would think he has this epiphany, he has a conversation with God, as he does here too. But what does God tell him? Does God tell him, thou shalt do this, and he does it? No, the whole point of the 700 verse song is God, in the form of his charioteer Krishna, is telling him and reminding him of his own true nature and saying, you must decide. And he keeps saying, no, you tell me what to do, I'll do it. He says, no, you're going to have to decide. But here's how you meditate. Here's how you understand yourself. Here's how you understand your true nature and your true responsibilities. And you must own up to your action. You decide. And he decides in the last few verses. And then, of course, the battle ensues, and of course, they come out. The point of this is self will is a very important concept in Hinduism, and one does not give it up so easily. One gives up the sense of self more easily. That surrender is a core part of Hinduism. The surrender of the self is a core part of Hinduism. Through meditative practices or religious practices and ritual, just the way I described to you about my own morning ritual. Those are all part of Hinduism. What other things do Hindus believe? So I think I've covered pretty much the broad range of things that generally Hindus will believe. Technical question from Marian: what is the difference between prayer and meditation in the Hindu tradition? Oh my God, that's going to take another full unit course for me to explain the difference between prayer and meditation. This is a really long subject. I'm not going to get into it. There are ways of praying. Chanting can be prayer. Sitting in front of a deity can be prayer. Just invoking the deity in your heart or is prayer. Opening your heart is prayer. Singing alone or together is prayer. Working and acting through your actions is prayer. All of these can be prayer. Dance can be prayer. Everything can be prayer. What matters is your heart open and connected with the world? And with this, my long walk on Hinduism is about to get over, which is to say, the yoga tradition comes from Hinduism because we understand how the physical body works. We understand how the energy body works, how the chakras work. How do you open your heart? A heart that has become hardened by operating in the physical world, where we think we in the head and the heart is hardened, and the sense of separation from everyone has become ingrained in ourselves. How do you open your heart? So many techniques, so many ways of opening the heart chakra. And that's the whole process of yoga itself. The whole process of yoga is to connect this narrow self, this small little heart, to the self of all selves, the heart of hearts. You open this heart through all these myriad ways I've just described to you. And that's the whole practice and philosophy of Hinduism, the opening of the heart. And a very nuanced understanding of how it feels, what practices work, what doesn't work, and what system of lifestyle is needed for these practices to be stable. Through generations of hit and trial, transmission and losses, all of these have happened. But that's what the whole tradition is. Long walk is over. Now let me tell you about spiritual direction in the Hindu tradition, unless you have pressing questions that must be answered right now. No pressing question?
Pressing question that
yes, sir.
Has to be answered, but maybe just later, just sure. For a thought. I'm wondering about just the observations of a lot of religions have a tension between what tenets they will conserve and what will they reform or progress towards. And with the vastness of the history of what we call the collective of what is Hinduism, and knowing that there are certain tenets that you're telling us about that of a belief system, or the things that have gone out, has there been this tension within, I guess, the collective what we call Hinduism?
All the time. Yeah, that's a great question, and all the time. Like I showed you that verse earlier, those gods that were mentioned in this verse from maybe 5,000, maybe 7,000 years ago, we don't necessarily pray to those divinities anymore. And we don't see a problem with that. It's okay, and that evolution is understandable as our understanding of nature evolves. Have tenets changed? All the things I've told you are sort of things that have kind of not changed. The practices may have evolved, and the names might change, but those tenets, like I just said, the understanding of karma, the true nature of reality being this is an illusional reality and there's a deeper reality inside. and the essence of everything being truth and consciousness and bliss, those have remained across over time. But the names and forms of deity, the names and forms of shapes and forms of practice have tended to evolve. And over time, every now and then Hinduism acquires a whole bunch of stuff, and then everything must be burnt down to the ground and built up. In fact, even in the Bhagavad Gita, this, what I was just telling you, he describes this is we think it happened about 5,500 years ago, but even at that time, he's saying, look, I have conveyed this information previously, but it keeps getting lost. I'm going to tell it to you again. So this is found, but it's so subtle that it's easy to lose, so it gets lost again, and then we have to rediscover it. That's just the nature of memories across human civilizations. We keep forgetting, we keep having to remember. We go through 2,000 years of forgetfulness, and we'll remember again, and we'll try to recreate it. Our connection with the universe. We've lost it, we're going to try to reclaim it. Our connection to ecology, we've lost it, we're going to try to recreate it, because if we don't, we will burn everything down to the ground, and then the rats will evolve into humans again, and maybe they'll do it again. That's just the way it is, right? Okay. Which also, I do want to say, in the Hindu tradition, you could be a scientist and be a practicing Hindu. There is zero sense of irony or mismatch there. There is no anti-science gene in the Hindu tradition. Truth is truth, and if you have ways of finding truth, those ways are all welcome. And all we say is, if you're investigating physical reality, you got to have the instrumentation to measure and understand physical reality. And we're okay with that. Scientists are welcome completely. You do not have to shed your science, you do not have to shed your skepticism in this tradition by a wide margin. But you could still understand that there is an underlying reality. I'll tell you a story of Vivekananda. This is a guy who came to, he's revered in India now, Swami Vivekananda. He came to the Chicago Conference, Parliament of World Religions in 1893, and he spoke in great English. He was well received. And his thing was, when he was a seeker, he was taught in the English medium, like I was, but he was therefore skeptical. He says, I want to see God. I want to see God. And so he kept asking people as a young man, and they said, well, if you want to see God, there's this guy down the street, down the train station, go see him. So he goes to see this guy. He goes to see what was going to be his guru eventually. He says, do you see God? And this illiterate or semi-literate man says, yes, I see God as clearly as I see you. He says, I must see God myself. And he touches him in the chest with his hand, and he faints, and he has a vision. The point is that this need to see God is very simple. But the Hindu answer is, I see God as clearly as I see yourself. Because that, of course, is the truth, is it not? If I'm seeing you, I am also seeing God. And that truth is obscured, and we keep trying to find it. So I hope, Eddie, I've answered your question in a sort of very roundabout, but hopefully ultimately satisfactory sense. All right, let me tell you about spiritual direction in the Hindu tradition and the direction we're going at my institute. I work closely. I'm the dean of program at the Hindu Community Institute, and I work closely with Spiritual Directors International, and as well as GTU. We're trying to figure out how to sort of create this coalition. Here's our understanding of what it means to be human. The Sanskrit word for Mars is Mangal. Mangal is used as a sign of auspiciousness. When you say, I wish everything is Mangal with you, we are really saying, may all be well, may all be auspicious. But sadly, not all is auspicious or on Mars. Why? If you were to move to Mars, as Elon Musk is promising to do in a few years, they have low atmospheric cover, high temperature range, and so practically the whole planet is unlivable. Because there's no atmosphere, it's cold and colder. Look at the temperature ranges, minus 20 to minus 80 Celsius. That's ridiculously cold, and very wide ranges in one single day. That's a 100 degrees Fahrenheit swing in one day. Ridiculous. You do not want to live there, because you would not survive. You would not survive. What human beings need to survive is this: a comfortable and narrow band of experiential states. Is it not? Now, what we've concluded, this is my understanding of the Hindu Dharma, understanding of Dharma, is that is the essential reason, that is Dharma, that is the essence of society. A working society is air conditioning for the spiritual self, providing each of us a comfortable and narrow range of emotional states. If someone gave me $168 billion, as Elon Musk has, would I be so happy that I'd go crazy? Possibly yes. So I have to have friends to be happy with, to share my happiness with. If something unhappy happens to me, would I be so sad that is just the worst state to be in? Yes. Would I like to share my sadness with everyone? Yes. So a good, well-functioning society serves as this emotional scaffolding which gives us a narrow range of emotional states. Comfortable. Yes, there is sadness. Yes, there is happiness, but nothing off the charts. Nice and comfortable. Air conditioning for the spiritual self. That is the true, another definition of Dharma, which is Dharma sustains the society. The same two people that I described, God Himself and Arjuna, are having a conversation. This is in the bigger book, not the 700 verses, where Krishna explains Dharma is that which sustains the society and ensures the well-being and progress of humanity. Dharma is the glue that binds all of us together, both inside ourselves and together to each other. And the problem in modern society is a decline in Dharma. That glue that binds us together and the glue that holds me together is both weak. And a restoration of this glue is important. Now, Hindus have a problem. We come from a very different society, and for that, I rely upon my understanding of elementary or middle school math to explain, which is this. Hindus are not a congregational society. A congregational society is closely organized. One day of the week, you get ministering, prayers, sermons, and space for confidential conversation. You have a lot going on in a society that congregates on specific days of the week. Hindus are not that way. 80% of the Hindus don't go to temples, don't feel the need to go to temples because it's not an essential part of our tradition. You could pray at home, you could pray in yourself. You don't need a physical deity to pray to at all, right? So we're not a congregational society. On the other hand, we're the opposite of the society. And the joke I used to make, and I still make, is this. If you ever go to India, and as soon as you land, you will know that we're not a congregational society. We're a crowding society. We just crowd. There's a lot of people and they assemble. The Hindu society is organized very differently for different needs. So think of ministering. You go to a guru for spiritual counsel. To pray, you might go to a temple. You don't need to. To have the scripture explained to you, you might go to a specialist in scripture. To have confidential conversation, you talk to your Uber driver or to your astrologer. Right? You talk to different people for different things. I love this cat. This is a great class. Dina's cat is just walking across the camera. It's fantastic. Hello. All right, sorry. So the problem that Hindus have as we land in this society is we're non-congregational. Everyone's in everyone's business, and you can't go to a temple and solve for it. Our problem is we don't come from a society where we can do a one-stop shop for all your spiritual counseling needs. So in that sense, we're not a chaplaining society, we're a spiritual direction kind of society, sort of. And interestingly, the Western society, now the US, UK, are kind of, because of the degree of de-churching that's going on, is also becoming similarly disassembled. You're going to have to go to different people for different business, right? So what we're doing, of course, is we have a problem. This society is failing. And this is not just the West. All of society, every modern society is failing. Huge loneliness problems. So I'm connecting this back to what I said a couple of slides ago. That which sustains the society is dharma. That which glues all of us together is dharma. But we are coming unglued. Loneliness, this is pre-pandemic, is all the norm. People are more and more alone than ever before. And that is creating a spiritual crisis like never before. Because that air conditioning is gone. We are now the whiplash of emotional states is too much. And that can be restored by recreating that connection. So here's how we think about it. Think of this as a modern apartment life. Apartment, not in the name, the shape of the houses or flats we live in, but how we live apart in our own selves. Now think of this life, a single individual's life that they live in this loneliness band all by themselves, right? Now, an ideal modern life has more stuff going on where you have people to share with, family, friends, extended friends, who you can have the full spectrum of life. You can talk to someone about disputes you're having or despair or guilt that you're experiencing. When you have a society to work with or talk to, you can engage with them on the full spectrum of life. But not just that, time passes. And we mark the passage of time in two ways. One is personal time, the stages of life. The Hindu tradition thinks of 4 stages of life. First stage is brahmacharya, where you conserve your spiritual energy and learn as children. Then grihastha is married family life, where you're essentially making money, earning money, and enjoying your life. And then vanaprastha literally means pointing to the forests, which is to say, you're now beginning to think of retirement and you're now essentially engaged in outbound charitable activities, improving your spiritual quotient, so to speak. And finally, sannyasa, renunciation. You give up everything and head for the hills. Right? Those are the 4 stages of life. And one of the problems that we face in the modern life, there's a very nice article in The Atlantic by, was it David Brooks, the American enterprise think tank. A really interesting story about how, because we are physically in a stage where we should be beginning to renounce, but emotionally we are still thinking we got to go out and and earn more money and have more enjoyment. So what's happening is we're feeling this plateauing and in fact a decline and fall because we want something that which we have gone past. And if you recognize that you're now in a different stage of life, then you wouldn't want to go back. You'd want to enjoy that stage of life. But because we don't have a good understanding, we are out of sync with our own inner clocks. The other passage of time is community time, traditions, festivals, time, which is what, celebration of before birth, death, after death. There is all this time that is spent together, including festivals. Now, smash all these together. Now you have life in the Hindu community. Our perspective is all of this creates a richness of life, a life lived with friends and family, and yet deeply rooted to the self and our current state in our life. Now, what does this mean? Why should you care as chaplains or spiritual directors? Well, where do you sit? You are here almost as family. Your job is to reinflate the y-axis, reinflate the sense of community and say, I'm here, you're at a hospital bed, you need someone to talk to, I'm here, and I'm giving, we have a space which is sacred and personal. I'm here for you. I'm here to listen to what you're saying, which has always been the function of family, always been the function of friends. But because we live in an apartment type society, we are that family and friend, creating that space, having that conversation. Now, the way we teach it is what we're doing is we're now breaking it down because I'm a techie. All of us are techies. So what we're doing is we're teaching spiritual care in the following manner, picking each of these aspects and saying, okay, what goes on in this place, and teaching that in our courses. Our vision for scalable care is essentially the following. I'm going to skip over the juicy bits. I'm going to get directly to the vision is here, which is what we're building is self-organization. I want to highlight this here. There is a maybe justified concern about organized religion, and I hope I've convinced you that Hinduism is far from organized. It is a non-organized, self-organizing religion. We do not have a single father figure or a single person that we go to. Hindus are notoriously argumentative and they have a personal sort of stance. Anyway, the point is it's self-organizing, and so it must self-organize, and that's what our vision is, which is create a system by which institutional needs as well as personal needs are met through a continuum of care, volunteers as well as professional chaplains and counselors that don't act alone. There's a whole system for contact management, case management, call management. We're building and writing all of those processes, knowledge assets that are being curated, experts that are being assembled, and an insurance system, because of course you're going to get sued if you work alone. So you need an insurance umbrella as well. So we're building that with the expectation that just the way you could call 911 and get police or medical or help, if you call one number, you should be able to get access to spiritual care. So that's what we're building up to at our institute, because we think that's what will restore the connection we have to each other. Now, why should individuals learn this? Why are you doing this? And my sense is you're doing it for similar reasons to why people come to the courses that we teach, which is you're finishing your education. What it means to be human involves being bipedal. We walk. What it means to be human is that we're social, we care for each other. But both of these things, caring for each other as well as walking, while being innate, we must still be taught those. My parents taught me to walk. Even though I'm bipedal, someone still had to teach me. We have this innate capacity to serve, but we must learn to serve. And I guess you're doing this program because you want to serve, and you're learning to serve. And that service will make you feel more human, more complete, because it's an essential part of being a human, of caring for each other. Monkeys, even monkeys, rhesus monkeys, spend 35% of their time grooming each other. And they keep meticulous accounting of how many minutes does this guy groom the other person and whose kids was being growled at by which monkey. They keep track of these social things because that's how their society is glued together. This silent math of give and take. And so being more articulate and more certainly sensible and conscious humans, we have this innate capacity for care that we haven't been able to express, that we want to express. And so as volunteers who are learning to serve, and as professionals like you who are learning to serve, you're essentially filling out an essential nature of your humanness, our humanness, which is why we give. And that brings me to the end of my talk. Now I'm open for questions, comments, feedback, and commentary. And if you want to peek into a temple, I promise to look up and show you what's going on in the temple. But I will take questions at this time. You can raise your hand or unmute yourself. I'm going to ignore you for a second while I look up the live stream somewhere here. Okay. Okay, any questions or comment, please either raise your hand or unmute yourself, and I will try to answer. I hope I've got everyone's comments and questions, and I hope I have been truthful to you in the most sort of appropriate way. If you found my answers incomplete or incorrect or inconsistent, please call me on it and I'd be happy to correct. I'm sorry, I'm looking at my screen. I'm looking for the live stream, so just give me a sec. Any questions or comments? Kitten, you can unmute yourself and say all those nice things. Come on.
Thank you. That was amazing.
Yeah, don't be stingy with your praise. There is no need to be stingy with the praise.
Thank you for showing up the tip of the iceberg. I'm thirsty for more.
Sure. Marion, yes, ma'am.
The question I'm always throwing in the questions about youth because that's my context that I work in. Can you talk a little bit about Hindu family life in these modern times and how are youth learning or wanting to learn or totally not wanting to learn the traditions? It's probably a shared issue across states.
I'm so glad to know it's shared across because, of course, we are distraught by it. The youth are the youth are an interesting situation, but I don't grudge them their lack of faith. I'm completely okay. I was there myself. I personally don't have a problem. So in the Hindu tradition, how do we convey our tradition? We just live it. It's a lived tradition. So a lot of this is osmosis. Frankly, I think I'd have been better off if my father had taught me a lot of this stuff, but we never had this conversation. One of my most spiritually sort of active periods of learning was unfortunately upon my father's death, which was exactly 11 years and 2 weeks ago. And those 2-3 weeks of immersion in my tradition and on the meaning of death were transformative in making me who I am. But interestingly, while I myself was a science-minded youth and therefore maybe for even some periods of time atheistic, interestingly, I look back and I'm doing a lot of the stuff my father was doing, and he never taught me any of this stuff. He never told me to do any of this stuff. But here I am doing the same stuff. The same chanting, the same prayers. And so by osmosis, I have learned. And my hope is my children will learn as well by the same osmosis. We don't want to force our kids. Josie had a question.
Yeah, I'm curious about how the pandemic you feel like has affected life and like speaking from your own experiences and just thinking about the innovations that so many religious traditions have needed in these moments, like both the, to your point around congregating and community, like have you seen any play in that? Like have folks remained in like more individual pursuits, or has there been a desire for community in new ways? I'm just curious.
This is a great question, and frankly, you have to confirm before I answer to you that you're not being paid to ask this question.
I will confirm that for you.
There you go. You're not being paid to ask that question. It is a great question, and much like every other religious tradition, this has been a tremendous setback in the community. But shockingly, as I'm sure your communities are also discovering, it has been a terrific blessing in disguise. I kid you not. On the 13th of it is Friday, the 13th of March. You remember that day. Mayor London Breed puts out a tweet sometime in the evening. This is of San Francisco. I don't live there, but the tweet affected us all. She said, we're locking down the city. The city is now locked down. This is Friday the 13th. For 10 years, I've been teaching yoga at the Livermore Temple. Those classes are free. They're open to everyone. Marion, you're welcome because you're down the street when we open. But I had a class next morning, and now thanks to Mayor Breed, that class was not going to happen. So what did I do? I said, look, I have a Zoom account for business. I'm going to send the Zoom account to all the people who come to my class. Come ye to my class kind of deal. So I send out one Zoom account, and I'm not kidding you. It has been 10 months and then some. We use the same Zoom account. 1,100 people now attend classes, 50 instructors. We do 6 classes a day. And we called it, to answer your question, Caitlin, we call it the community for immunity. Why? Because it is a stated scientific fact that if you feel a sense of community, your immunity response is better. You feel that connection and it boosts your immunity. So we said we must feel a sense of community. We can't meet, but surely we can do these classes. Surely we can see each other. So we created this community for immunity, and more people join us every day. You're welcome to join. It's not a religious thing. It's free. You're welcome to do it. I can push the link out here. I'll show you the page, and you're all welcome to attend these classes. I teach some of these classes, not all. Let me show you where it is on this page. So here is the link. The link is hinduci.org. You go to this website. This is my website, and that, of course, evidently is me in the background. This is the institute where I'm the dean. And here you go to wellness, online yoga. No, you go to wellness. You see me doing one of those fancy yoga poses, but here you see these classes. You go right here and register, and you get these classes. They're free and they're fun, and the instructors really love it. We love it. We really appreciate it. That's one thing that's happened in the community. We've come together as a community, like in ways that I would not have done 6 classes a day. I would not have 50 instructors teaching. That would not have happened if it weren't for the pandemic. And this has happened. The other thing that's happened with the temple, which is the temple community is a very thriving community, is the temple's gone online. So the Hindu temple has its own video feed. This is the Livermore temple. And you can watch what's going on at any given point. Of course, this is in the future. Let's look at what's happening today. Live now. What's live now? Nothing's live now. Okay, I'm going to just go to something that has already happened. Then I'll show you what's going on inside the temple. Let's go play. No? Okay, it's loading, so it'll happen eventually. You got to take my word for it, I guess. I can't seem to get my feeds working today. I apologize. But essentially, the temple live casts everything. The last class I did show everything. I'm just a little miffed that it's not live. Let me bring you. Okay, hopefully this. There you go. This is working. Great. So, yes, the temple's gone live. And so all the practices inside the temple, you can watch what's going inside the temple, which is amazing. And that's brought everyone together. So frankly, the pandemic has been net positive in the sense of the community, though terrible for the society at large, and of course the economy has been where it is. But we have found ways to reconnect with each other, and the essential humanity that we had forgotten about, I think we have remembered again, and that's been a positive for us to take back. Other questions, comments? Yes, Tessie.
Thank you. I want to go back to something you said at the very beginning, as I remember it. You said reading about Hinduism is like reading an autopsy report. And I was struck by that because that's part of the milieu that I work in as a chaplain, is that often I have to talk with families about autopsies and if they want them for their loved one who's died that we don't necessarily know what happened. And so the interesting point, of course, is that autopsies are not always conclusive, even when we do go searching. But I just appreciated that analogy, and I think I just agree that you're absolutely right, that I've been reading a lot about Hinduism, and I love what I'm reading and what I'm able to capture, which is not always, not nearly everything. But listening to someone who practices it, who lives it, has been really life-giving to me and quite enjoyable, and makes me. I'm writing all sorts of notes of things that it's making me think about. So I just want to say thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you for that. Other questions or comments? Joe, yes, sir.
Can you talk a little bit about maybe some navigating a bit of the tension around the sort of core belief that we're not our body, and we should, that we should not identify with our body on some level, and then social justice issues which are so focused on body identification and separation?
Yes, those are fantastic questions. Again, I hope you've not been paid for this. This is a very good question, a very important question for us. Not identifying with the body is a very important teaching in the Hindu tradition, and so essential, because one of the worries that most people have is life, end of life, and what happens after end of life. And this recycling ethic of the Hindu tradition means that this life is gone, no problem, you're going to get a new one. It's all good, right? Which means the stress is off. You're not saying it's all or nothing. It's like infinite heaven or infinite hell. No, you get another chance all the time, because it's a progressive cycle of evolution. You do well, you get better odds next time, you do better, and you keep improving. That's the underlying thing. So it changes attitude towards end of life. Surrendering instead of fear. And in fact, in the Buddhist and the Bon and the Hindu tradition, the moment of your end of life is extremely important. They say, yatha antemati tathagati, as the thoughts at the end of your life, and so the travel into the future life. So if your thoughts at the end of life are fearful, then you get a fearful next outcome. So you want to relieve that sense of fear and say, you know what, these clothes are over. You're gonna get new clothes. Just let these go and move on to the next clothes. And you look at all the studies on near-death experiences, as well as reincarnation studies in the University of Virginia. They back these things that in the Tibetan Bardo, in the Buddhist systems, in the Hindu systems, these beliefs have been seemed legendary and superstitious. But you look at all the studies that are going on, they're backed. At least I think that there is sense. Is there science behind it? No, but certainly science can go looking. There's no need to be all sort of in your face about it. But yeah, end of life, the fact that you come again, and the sense of reincarnation eases the pressure on the stakes involved in the end of life and the infinite afterlife. That's definitely the case. The other is in terms of how people want to depart. There are verses we chant. One of the verses we chant at end of life is, I'm going to chant it for you, and then I'll explain in the few minutes we have available. Om Triambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushtivardhanam Urvarukamiva Bandhanan Mrityor Mukshayamamritat. This is called it's a prayer to the three-eyed God, three-eyed being past, present, and future, all-seeing divinity. And the interesting analogy that I want to point you to is simply this. This verse is essentially a death-defying or life-extending verse, but in reality, if you pay attention to the meaning, it's very simple. A ripe fruit, when ripe, detaches from the tree and falls on its own. And therefore, release me from the clutches of death, because it is time, ripeness. And so that sense of letting go brings with it freedom. Letting go of this body association brings with it freedom, brings with it lightness, which is what you need at end of life in order to now plan your next project, next adventure. And that's how the Hindus look at it in general.
I have a question.
Yes, please.
I just got
Oh.
Yes, Joe. Yes, sir.
My question was kind of in relation to this idea, though, around social justice issues.
Oh, yes.
When we have a society that's really pressing on identification with the body, how to sort of navigate that from a spiritual perspective.
Great point. Sorry, I did miss that, and that's true. So social justice issues around the identification with the body, or the shape, form, and sort of structure and nature of the body, and what it means. The spiritual and philosophical belief in the Hindu tradition is this body, like I said, is just something that you shed onto the next thing. So the project of this body is to recognize the true nature of reality, right? Which is also a Buddhist thing, right? Which is that's the end of suffering, is to know that the cause of suffering is attachment, right? And so to that extent, I often get asked, because social justice issues are common, the Hindu response to it is to say that you are who you are, and knowing who you are is important, and living who you are is important. Knowing your truth and living your truth is important. And a society that allows everyone to know and live their truths is the right kind of society to strive for. That's how Hindus look at social justice issues. Over identification of the body, like I said, you have to know and exercise your true nature in order to understand the true nature of reality. If you are in denial of your true nature as a physical human being, then you will also be in denial of your true nature of this whole thing itself, because denial has become your first nature. So acceptance is important in that sense. There's one more question, and then we'll wrap. Alexandra, with a great last name, Subramaniam. Yes.
My husband is from South India. So how does Maya illusion fit into this then? I know that's a huge question, but
it's exactly the question you'd ask at noon, because now you have no time. So how does Maya fit in? And that goes back to the Matrix. How would you behave if your eyes were opened in your dream, in a lucid dream? How would you dream a lucid dream? If you knew this was a dream, how would you dream? You dream in a way that's more enjoyable. You now know it's a dream. Will you dismantle the dream? Will you say, oh, there's nothing to do, this is all a dream? No, you're going to double down on your dream and say, okay, let me enjoy this dream. Let me live this dream fully, because it's a dream. I'm aware. So once you know the true nature of reality is illusion, then you understand what to do in this illusion. It's an illusion. This self is an illusion, but now you can live it fully and exercise the intention that set this self into motion. And so, does that lead to a moral code and so on? There's a lot of unpacking, but there's not much time for that, unfortunately. But I hope I've given you a kind of sort of answer, but I'm sure it's dissatisfying, so I do apologize for a half answer, or, fractional answer.
Thank you.
All right, closing prayers. Again, from the Upanishads, this is the closing prayer. This is, again, if you've been to yoga classes, this is how the Sanskrit reads in Roman letters. This is how it looks in Sanskrit, and this is what it means. It's a prayer for world peace. No individual divinity is named or mentioned. All divinity is invoked. And again, it's for universal peace. It's not for me personally. But you'll notice all sorts of peace are mentioned. So I invite you to join me. Please sit comfortably. Sit in any comfortable posture. Sitting with your back straight. Back, neck and head in a straight line. And now, just close your eyes. Bring a smile to your face, half moon, and then let go. Just let the smile dissolve and travel all the way down into your heart. Just relax. Be mindful of your breath. Just relax. Finding peace within and radiating this peace outside into the world all around, and wishing peace upon all. Bring your palms together in Namaskar Mudra at the heart center. We're going to chant Om 3 times and then the closing prayers, Sarve Bhavantu Sukhina. Exhale completely, take a deep breath. Inhale. Listen to the sound vibrate inside you. Inhale. Inhale. Inhale, and now I'll chant. Sarve bhavantu sukhinah, sarve santu niramayaha, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschid dukkha bhag bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Bend forward in a deep sense of surrender, sending out good wishes for all and receiving good wishes in return. Rub your palms together to generate some heat, and then gently shield your eyes, and then blinking, open your eyes and pull your palms back like an open book. Namaskar. I should leave you with my YouTube link in case you want to catch more of either the meditation classes or some of my other talks. You can go to YouTube and I will just share my screen. There are a couple of ways. You could, of course, send me an email. I can drop my email right here. You go to YouTube and look for Yoga of Living Deeply. And here there's a bunch of playlists, some of which are interesting. Let me see. You want to go for, there are recorded meditations, Yoga Nidra, of course, and let's see, Interfaith talks about Hinduism. A lot of talks are recorded here and are available for you to see. The other place to go to is you go to livingdeeply.institute, just 2 words, and you're going to see a lot of my other talks and courses and videos, including I have a few courses that I have over here on these are Hindu practices as applied to modern life, meditation as well as karma yoga, bhakti yoga, and so on. So go to YouTube. That's probably a good place. If you do want to reach me, I can leave my email here, as well as sorry, I sent it to the wrong person. Everyone, this is my email. Those are my 2 emails. Any of those are fine. They both come to me. And I'd love to hear from you. And I'd be happy to answer anything or point you in whatever direction if you need to speak. Heather?
Could you please put up your website
Sure,
address?
sure, yeah, 1 second. So the yoga classes were at, let me just to be clear, yoga classes are at hinduci.org. This is the course that I told you about. That's hinduci.org, and the yoga classes are on the wellness. The Living Deeply is at livingdeeply.institute. And essentially what Living Deeply is all the practices of yoga, not just postural yoga, but yoga of action, yoga of devotion. Each of those philosophical ideas I want to unpack and convert into practices that we can follow every day. Because I live in California, I figured I'd trademark it. I call it the yoga of living deeply. But the idea is you take everyday experiences and figure out ways to enrich those experiences through reflection and practices and so on. So that's Living Deeply at our institute. Heather, you had a question.
Yeah, I was just wondering if that prayer that you described about the perspective of death and like a ripe fruit falling from the tree, that was just really moving. And I was wondering if there's a particular for it to hear it again or explore it more.
Yeah, I got a bunch of stuff. So let me find it for you. As
well as the prayer at the beginning and end.
Beginning and end, it turns out I have been lax and I do apologize. Marian, can I send it to you? Is it possible to drop things into this? It is possible to drop. Oh my God, I did not see this earlier. Let me drop it here. The Sanskrit prayers, I have long essays, trust me. Oh, they're terribly long, but they're good essays. I wrote them myself. So they're here. And also, of course, like everyone does, I have some of these recorded on my SoundCloud. Let me find that for you. So I've transmitted these prayers. There are 3 prayers that are listed there. You will find, let me see if I can find profile tracks. Yes, SoundCloud. I'm looking for where is the talk? The talks are gone. What happened? Okay. Oh, there are the talks. Okay, good. So if you go to SoundCloud and again write Yoga of Living Deeply, you will find the audio version of these talks. Let me find it for you here. You go to SoundCloud, as one does, and then you write Yoga of Living Deeply. I should learn to spell. Here it is. And here, of course, there's meditation. Those are not what you want. You want, sorry, I should have just gone this way. You're looking for Akras Gorak Yoga Talks. That's what you're looking for. So I did the opening and the closing. And there's another third talk. It's a bonus talk on wholeness. And it unpacks a verse on infinity. And that's a fun part of my talk. Sorry, I couldn't cover it. Usually I do this live, usually with bagels and pretzels in the class. Couldn't do it today, but I promise you I have a bagel and pretzel class, which is a lot of fun. But you'll get to see some of that over here. You're looking for these talks. Now you're looking for the talk on, your question was the, how do I find that? Triambakam Yajamahe. There is chanting, and of course it's fake, but it says Dalai Lama chanting it. It's not true, but what the heck. It says Dalai Lama chanting. It's not true, but there's a bunch of stuff that's available here. This is the one. It's called the Mahamrityunjaya mantra. I will type that out for you so you can look for it. Here, Mahamrityun. Okay.
This is the prayer of the ripe fruit.
Yeah, the ripe fruit mantra. So I'll drop the link here. Here, let me the Wikipedia, of course. Why not? There's Wikipedia. There's Wikipedia for everything. I'm going to drop that here. Maha means great, of course. Mrityu means death. Morto, like Mrityu, in English as well as Spanish and in Sanskrit means death. Jaya means victory. And this is the great victory over death. This is the mantra. This is what I chanted. And here's the meaning. Of course, it's Wikipedia, so your mileage varies and buyer beware and so on. But this is the mantra, Mahamrityunjaya mantra. And what it literally means is kind of cucumberish fruit, which when ripe, it just drops off on its own. So you let go. This clinging, you let go of it. And that's how you win over death. And the three-eyed one is usually an indicator of Shiva, who you're seeing over here with his bull over on this side. But Shiva is the three-eyed one. But three-eyed means past, present, and future, that which is outside of time. There's more, but again, you can go from here and look for it. Mahamrityunjaya mantra is what it's called. All right. Namaste. Thank you very much. I hope you have a great rest of your week. Enjoy your classes. And please, I love hearing from you. So if you have any questions or comments, feel free to reach out. Namaste. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Absolutely marvelous. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Kenji. you.